Snoqualmie City Council is now called to order. All please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Councilmember Jeans, can you please lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
City Clerk, can you please take the roll call?
Councilmember Jeans.
Here.
Councilmember Ross.
Here.
Councilmember Holloway.
Here.
Councilmember Mayhew.
Here.
Councilmember Lassay.
Here.
Councilmember Sundwall.
Here.
Councilmember Shepherd.
Here.
Mayor Larson.
I am here. All council members are present. May I have a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda as stated. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Shepherd?
I would like to take off the consent agenda, the
Warrants?
yeah.
Okay. Warrants will be pulled off the consent agenda. Councilmember Mayhew?
I'd like to propose that the items on the committee of the whole happen in the reverse order.
Okay, if we could, I don't have those on my notes. What?
I got him.
All right, if you could remind me when we get there. Councilmember Ross?
I wanted to make a quick statement under, about Sound Cities Association. Should that be under Committee of the Whole then?
Yes, that'd be great, or under reports if you'd like.
Okay,
Okay.
thanks.
Councilmember Lassay?
I'm not understanding the committee of the whole item for resolution 1461. Is that, are we discussing, continuing discussion from our workshop, or?
No, but it has to be on the agenda.
Okay, so it's not an item on the, it's just because it has to be on the agenda, we just did it at 5 o'clock?
That's for the Salish? Yeah.
Yes, so we just did that. We did that at 5 o'clock, we're not going to re-address
Correct.
it, okay.
Right. I was going to address when we got there, but glad you did it now, so. Councilmember Lassay, you also asked a question on an item.
Yes.
Oh, I'm trying to remember what it was now, the.
Discussion around the I-90 interchange schedule.
Oh, yeah,
and,
whether we'd be happy to bring forth the resolution if the majority of the council, I assume the council would be supportive of imploring upon WASDOT to provide designated access onto the I-90 during the construction of the project, so.
Why don't we discuss that at committee of the whole?
We can do that. I assume there's no objection to adding that to the committee of the whole?
What? Discussion of a resolution around the I-90 interchange, and
Is there a problem there? Just turn right at Jacobia, you have no problem. Sure, sounds good.
All right, if there's no objection. Councilmember Sundwall?
So, not to be a dork here, but is there, maybe I'm the only one, I get frustrated by things being pulled off the agenda on a consistent basis, like warrants. I think we all understand clearly why it's being pulled off. To me, it's a waste of time. Is there a mechanism in place to object to something being pulled off the consent agenda, or?
Not currently. The consent implies unanimous consent in the current council's rule, policies and procedures, and so if one member says they want it pulled off, it can be pulled off.
Okay.
You could modify your procedures to address that if you'd like. All right. Anything else, council? All right, so with those items as discussed, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. With that, we move on to public hearings, presentations, proclamations, and appointments. And I have a couple proclamations this evening, and appreciate some folks who want to come receive those who are here tonight. Whereas diaper need, the condition of not having a sufficient supply of clean diapers to ensure that infants and toddlers are clean, healthy, and dry can adversely affect the health and welfare of infants, toddlers, and their families. And whereas national surveys report that 1 in 3 mothers experiencing diapers need at some time while their children are less than 3 years of age, and 48% of families delay changing a diaper to extend their supply. And whereas the average infant or toddler requires an average of 50 diaper changes per week over 3 years, and whereas diapers cannot be bought with food stamps or WIC vouchers, therefore obtaining a sufficient supply of diapers can cause economic hardship to families. And whereas the people of Snoqualmie recognize that addressing diaper need can lead to economic opportunity for the city's low-income families and can lead to improved health for families, and the community. And whereas Snoqualmie is proud to be home to various community organizations that recognize the importance of diapers in helping provide economic stability for families and distribute diapers to families through various channels. Now, whereas this celebration also provides the opportunity to recognize and thank our professional planning staff and their technical competence and ethical commitment and dedication to public service. Now, therefore, I, Matthew R. Larson, Mayor of the City of Snoqualmie, on behalf of the City Council and our community, do hereby proclaim the week of September 24th through September 30th, 2018 as Diaper Need Awareness Week in the City of Snoqualmie. And so with Helen Banks-Rutan, from the Director of Development with the Eastside Baby Corner, will be accepting the proclamation. Helen, thanks for coming tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, members of the council, for having us here, members of the audience. We very much appreciate you recognizing National Diaper Need Awareness Week. It is an issue that we try to address this in this point of the year. Eastside Baby Corner helps kids from birth to age 12, providing all kinds of tangible goods, but diapers continues to be a huge need. You heard the reasons why in that. It is a major barrier for parents to be able to go to work or go to school because you have to have diapers at home and diapers at your daycare, and without any kind of assistance, it can be the expense that can push a family living on the edge into homelessness, into serious distress, and not allow them to be able to get on their feet by working or being able to go to school. That's what Eastside Baby Corner provides, about 1 million diaper changes every year to children in our region. Just in the first 2 quarters of this year, we provided 9,000 diaper changes for children living in Snoqualmie. And last year, we helped around, let's see, it was 269 infants and children. Unduplicated numbers in need were helped in the City of Snoqualmie with whatever they needed. Those are through partners like the Snow Valley Food Bank, Encompass, HopeLink, the Tribe. They order what they need from Eastside Baby Corner, the community donates it, or we purchase it with funding and make sure that kids have all of those kinds of tangible goods that allow them to have healthy physical, mental, emotional development, and supports their family in being able to be the kind of parent that they want to be. We reduce inequities, we keep kids safer, we reduce the risk of neglect and abuse. We allow children to be able to be school ready and to be able to have the kinds of things where they can succeed in life. So I very much appreciate your issuing the proclamation and putting a spotlight on this need that affects so many families in our area. Thank you.
Great. Helen, thank you.
Here's the
Thank you for coming. I know I'm speaking on behalf of the council and the residents, but I say thank you for all you do for the families in our community.
Thank you so much. We
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you. All right. Whereas there are over 30,000 persons with dwarfism in the United States, over 650,000 worldwide, and over 200 different types of dwarfism and skeletal dysplasia. And whereas the typical height range of persons with dwarfism is 2 feet 8 to 4 feet 5 inches, and an estimated 80% of persons with dwarfism have average height parents, siblings, and family members. And whereas the term midget is antiquated and offensive to most people with dwarfism, the preferred terminology of someone with dwarfism is his or her given name, or if the occasion necessitates, person with dwarfism, little person, or person of short stature. Whereas persons with dwarfism are protected under the Federal Americans with Disabilities Act, and whereas the medical prognosis for people with dwarfism varies from condition to condition, and with the severity of that condition in each individual, the majority of persons with dwarfism enjoy average lifespans and reasonably good health. Others will require surgeries or other medical interventions to address complications and maximize mobility. And whereas persons with dwarfism are able to function as equally as average height people and capable of participating in sports, driving, traveling, having fulfilling careers and families, requiring simple and reasonable accommodations, and whereas persons with dwarfism contribute to the strength of their community's economy by being productive members of the workforce, representing many careers and professions. Now, therefore, I, Matthew R. Larson, do hereby proclaim October 2008 as Dwarfism Awareness Month in the City of Snoqualmie, and encourage all residents to join me in recognizing the importance of this month. So, thank you all. And I believe we have, is it Kai? Kai? So we're honored to have Kai here to come to receive this. Kai, did you want to say anything? We have a microphone we could give you. Or?
Yeah, he's back.
He wants a picture of him in the council.
As we were getting ready to come here, he did tell me that he's glad that Dwarfism Awareness Month is in October because that is also his birthday month.
Yeah, he wants the council up there too. Yeah, he wants you in it too.
Okay. I just thought I'd at least offer one. Go in reverse order. You want to take this and hold it so they can see. Don't cover your face.
Other duties is assigned.
All right, now we're going to move on to the F&A committee. We have a pretty full agenda tonight, council, so the F&A committee asked that if you have any requests or questions about the following presentation, if you could just pass those along to members of the F&A committee to address. So with that, at this time, I'm pleased to invite Doug Johnson of Ralph Anderson Associates to come forward and do a comprehensive classification and compensation study of all management professional position update.
Good evening, council members. Yes, this will be a quick update, if I can get my slides up here. I know you have a lot on the agenda. So the first couple of slides are kind of a reminder in terms of where we're at. You'll recall that about a month ago I came before you and talked about survey agencies, and the preamble that I gave then was that data informs organizations on what to do in terms of updating your compensation plan to ensure that you can recruit and retain employees. So that's why we're going out and doing a market survey. The survey agencies that we utilized are listed here. This is an updated list because at the last meeting we added a couple agencies and then I corrected the fire and police columns that had some inadvertent X's or missing X's. So this is the base of agencies, kind of the playing field, so to speak, of agencies that we're surveying. Not every one of these agencies will have matches in terms of matches compared to the City of Snoqualmie job that we're surveying, but many of them will. If you recall that this is just layering in some information on population, gives us an indication of size. We have distance, driving distance involved, so we have a good indication in terms of location. We have a couple economic indexes, one cost of living and one relative wage, so that would be wages paid in one community versus another. Those are both published by the Economic Research Institute, and they give us a way of being able to look specifically at any comparable or comparative, economic information. And then we have the government form and police and fire services. Survey process, we collect this data and establish the job matches ourselves. We're not reusing data, we're not buying data. So we're making sure that all of the comparisons are tailored to this organization's job. And that's after an extensive process of interviewing people that are in the current jobs, looking at job descriptions, utilizing questionnaires so we understand the content of the jobs. Quick note about job matching. As we do a survey, if you have 19 agencies or 15 agencies that you're surveying, there will be some variability. If you look at an admin services director, some of them include finance, some don't. Some public works departments don't include parks like yours does here, where you have parks and public works combined. So there can be some variation in terms of functions and services. What we're very critical in looking at are the required qualifications, the major functions that are managed, or the major predominant duties, and just making sure that we have good matches overall. So we do make sure that we're controlling for that. The last thing before I get into data, I may have mentioned this last time I was here, market position is ultimately a policy decision. You as an organization decide how competitive your pay needs to be relative to these agencies we're surveying. Most organizations adopt a market position somewhere between the 50th percentile, which is also called the median, and the 75th percentile. So somewhere between half above and below the marketplace to being above 3/4 of the market and a quarter being above. So that's what this is showing. Obviously, you need to be able to fund that market position. So there is a budget element to this. It's not an unlimited bank account, so to speak. So you're ultimately wanting to optimize your ability to recruit and retain and utilize the market data for that purpose. So I want to give you a couple summary graphs. The purpose of tonight is to give you kind of the 10,000-foot picture. The overall magnitude of this data is what will be used to develop and recommend a new pay plan, but I'm not getting into job titles tonight. I really just wanted to focus on kind of the big picture analysis. So the first chart is looking at comparing to the market median. That would be the 50th percentile. And so what we're doing here is out of the 19 jobs that we surveyed, each one of these bars represents the number of job titles within 5% increments to the median. So if we kind of start, I've got a little pointer here. So if you look right here where I'm pointing, that would be the median of the market. So this bar here, the 4 job titles, we found 4 job titles that were 0 to 5% above market median. And then we have another 3 job titles that are 5 to 10% above market median. That's all that's above market median. And then we go to the left here, we don't have any that are 0 to 5%. We have our biggest group, 8 job titles we surveyed are 5 to 10% below market median. And then we have a couple that are 10 to 15% and a couple that are 15 to 20%. So we can also kind of summarize that up here where 16% of the jobs are more than 5% above median, 21% are within plus or minus 5% of median, and 63% of the jobs we surveyed are more than 5% below median. So what this is showing, as shown at the top here, 4.7% below on average for this group compared to median. Now, some of these jobs, if we're actually utilizing this data to update your pay plan, some of this data may not be relevant. You may have an internal tie or relationship that is more important. We haven't done that work in terms of taking these 19 data points and then bringing them into updating your pay plan. But the overall magnitude will be reflected in any recommendations that we make, meaning if you're on average 4.7% below market, you would expect to see some movement in pay ranges. Some jobs maybe 7 or 8% or more if we have a solid benchmark job down here. Some jobs where there's very little or no increase given because they're at or above marketplace. We have a similar chart compared to average. I prefer median when we have a small sample size like we're using here. Average, you can see what happens here when we use average is that the whole chart shifts left. So you're now 7.3% below average as opposed to 4.7% below median. That's because of probably 1 or 2 or a few agencies that are paying that much more than the rest of the agencies, and it just causes the data to skew a little bit. So going back just real quick, this market position, that's ultimately the decision and direction that I would be seeking tonight so that we can develop specific pay range recommendations and with the city's assistance cost that out and develop that ultimately into a pay plan. The 2 steps that will be required for that, I'm going to go back to this in a second, is benchmarking. So we would actually benchmark the good data points and then build relationships around that. And that's how we ultimately get to a pay plan. So that's base salary. I did want to talk a little bit about benefits. What we're trying to find out on benefits is the question as to whether your benefits help or hurt you relative to the market. So what this is showing is if we start at 4.7% below on base salary, which is what I showed you here, then if we add in benefits, this first snapshot we're going to take is we're adding in what are called cash benefits. And for your organization, that's primarily, or the only 2 things that it is deferred compensation, where the employer, where the city pays deferred comp. And then you also have a performance pay component that is something that these positions are eligible for. A couple other things that might be found in the market. One would be longevity pay, and the other might be an education incentive, paying for a degree requirement or beyond what the job requires. So if we do that comparison, you actually gain, you go from 4.7% below median to minus 0.8%. So a gain of, almost 3.1%. So in that instance, your benefits are actually better than the marketplace and helping you. Now, whether or not you need to factor that in becomes a policy decision, particularly since the biggest part of this gain is your performance component. So if that's something that as you pay positions, not everybody gets, it's not automatic, then that wouldn't be something necessarily that you want to count. But it's a substantive enough number and enough people get it that we wanted to show it and its impact in this data. And then the last category we looked at would be insurances. So if we look at this 0.8 and then we add in insurances, all we're looking at is kind of what the net impact of that is, and you gain to 2.3% above market. What we're looking at is the maximum health insurance contribution the employer pays. And in this instance, your organization pays 100% of the premium. Some organizations pay 90% and the employee pays 10%, or the organization pays 85% and the employee pays 15%. So the fact that you gain a little bit is a reflection of that practice. Obviously, it doesn't mean that everybody is getting that benefit. So you certainly have managers that are taking a lower tier of benefits, but we look at a max to max when we're comparing to the market. So what this is overall showing is if you're starting here minus 4.7 and going to 2.3, that's a shift of 7%. What that's showing is that your benefits are good. They're competitive with the market. They're solid. There's no deficiencies. This doesn't include leave benefits. I think the only observation we'll probably have on leave benefits is that you don't have administrative leave. Many of the other agencies do have admin management leave, kind of another bucket of leave that they give. You have comp time here, so we want to look at that a little bit further and make sure we're providing a good analysis of that. We also have some benefits in our survey that are still pending, so there'll be some cleanup work, and these numbers might shift a little bit between now and when we finalize the report. But the main objective is to get some direction on this market position and to be able to do some additional calculations and work with the city to develop the formal version of the report.
Are we allowed to ask questions?
No.
Well,
I would suggest if
He paused for like half a second, so I.
he could conclude, he'll be done shortly, and then you can ask questions, I would expect.
Well, I think I'm done enough to be able to answer questions. I wanted to get through those.
I read you well.
Yeah, I didn't anticipate him asking for direction tonight after I was asked to say, let's kick any questions to the FAA, so that's a little curveball at me.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Sean.
All right, so just so I make sure I understand this chart, the one with the negative 4.7 on it. So.
This one or this one?
The bar chart, the one with negative 4.7. Keep going forward, right there. So would it be fair to say that our compensation is under market on
base? Correct.
Base plus cash brings us close, and our insurance is so awesome that it puts us overall up 2.3% above
Correct.
these other organizations that you looked at. So is that a fair assessment?
Yes.
Okay. So my next question would be, because I'm not really good with math, is let's just say we bumped up base pay so that we were only 3 points, so we moved up 1 basis point, right? Does that mean that all the other two columns would also bump up?
Yes.
By that same basis point?
Not exactly, because the 2.3% column is based on a fixed dollar amount. So those fixed dollars, as we increase pay, will shift down in terms of percentage. So it will be not exactly there, but
less than 1, but more than 0.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Which I mean, the direction, just historically in the last several years, the direction of the council has basically been on these compensation is to try to, the target or that direction he's looking for is, just get us north of average so we remain in a competitive position. Councilmember Ross, and then Councilmember Lassay.
So you said there were 19 jobs surveyed?
Yes.
So that's the total population of all the jobs that we're considering for this?
We had 19 reportable data points. There were a couple of jobs where we didn't find matches. The best example would be your city attorney, where most agencies contract that and don't have an employee. So the fact that we lack a data point for that job, in building the pay structure, we would assess that job based on internal structure, and we'd be able to come up with a recommendation. But there, I think, are 2 jobs where we didn't have enough data.
Okay. And then do each one of them qualify then for the cash incentive?
Yes, I believe the benefits are
All of
equal
them
for
do?
all. Yes.
For everyone, okay.
Councilmember Lassay.
Just so I understand this chart, and want to make sure I get it too, is that if the base, and we're minus 4.7, the median is adjusted then to include base plus cash, as ours is adjusted as well.
That's correct.
So so if that's correct, then I don't need to ask anymore.
Yep, both sides, yes.
Councilmember Sumwell.
So does this factor in cost of living? And what I mean by that is this I don't know what I mean by that. So we're at 2.3. Is cost of living already factored in that? So I don't need to worry about, well, it's more expensive to live here than it is in Kent, or it's less expensive to live here than it is in some other agency.
It's not factored in because the overall of the market is that you're generally similar.
Okay, so we chose overall market that was within 0.5% of where we are.
Correct.
Okay, gotcha.
Of that cost of living.
Yes.
Councilmember Mayhew.
So if I could just ask Mayor, where we're headed with this, I had the impression or the idea that we were the idea was to collect questions. F&A was going to spend additional time with this, and then come back to the council later with some recommendations. Is that the path we're on?
Yeah, thank you. Is this time sensitive?
No.
You were saying you wanted some direction tonight, but I guess you can wait 2 weeks for that direction. If it gets vetted by F&A, comes back to council again. That's why I wanted to look to you, Bob, to see if what you're looking for here.
It would.
I mean, if you want to make any adjustments in the budget, the sooner the better, getting into the
Right.
budget process.
I believe the direction that the consultant is requesting is from the council's perspective, not necessarily from a committee. But if the council wanted to delegate that to a committee, they certainly have that they can do that if they like. But I think what he's looking for is generally what is the council's consensus about specific policy questions. Mayor.
Yeah, Doug, or Jim, if I could maybe clarify, maybe it'll help your question. For the direction you're asking tonight, and I'm hearkening back to where we've done this, a few times over the last decade or so. The good news of this, it seems that we're not way off. I mean, we're in a competitive position, and so if it still kind of aligns with the council's historical goal of keeping us just north of average, so we're in a competitive position. Is that a fair conclusion?
Yeah, except for a handful of jobs, which happens.
And that's what I was going to say, but
Yeah.
however, within the details, there might be certain jobs, and we've always found that some that get out of skew, some that are maybe a little low, or some that are a bit too high, and then we make those adjustments accordingly, which is kind of getting into the details. But, so I'm kind of thinking maybe we can wrap it up tonight if the council doesn't, Councilmember Mayhew?
So I have a number of questions, and I completely agree with the city administrator that the full council needs to weigh in on this. I just think that having some more thoughtful back and forth, followed by a recommendation with some, then the council making some decision, taking into account maybe some more information that the committee might drive out, taking into account their recommendation, but then discussion might be more useful than just trying to shoot from the hip here tonight. And if there's an issue with regards to budget, based on what I've seen, my own thought is that I would think the administration could proceed with the recommendation that you're going to make. It doesn't seem it's going to be likely to be
Way off.
wildly
Right.
off
Right.
from where the council ends up. So it seems like that would be a valid approach that would let everything keep moving forward, but would allow us to have a little more input to the whole council from a committee that spends a little more time with it.
Yeah, Councilmember Sunwell?
I'd be supportive of what Councilmember Mayhew said and push this back to committee and revisit it in a couple weeks. So I think the advantage of having to go to committee is it might be a huge box, but it puts it within a box, and then we have a conversation within that box to some degree. So I'd be supportive of that. Otherwise, we could probably spend 45 minutes tonight talking about it.
Yeah, no, and I agree. I think it gives us clarity. I mean, your points, I think, reflect mine in a little different angle, and that is we're not seeing anything here that suggests this train's going off the rails or in a different direction. So we have the information we need to prepare a budget. We can have that more nuanced conversation there. My only nervousness is I don't see in the foreseeable future between now and the budget that the agendas are going to get lighter. And so, if not tonight, then when? But yeah, I think we'll do that. Okay, so we'll pull it back to F&A committee for further discussion if there's no objection to that, council. Councilmember Jeans?
With the caveat that don't you just have a few more slides to present to just take it?
Oh, I think I only skipped one slide, which was how we're developing the salary range recommendations. I kind of verbalized this, that we're going to rely on benchmark data and then build relationships off of that. And the reason I want direction is that I don't want to use median and build a pay structure and then hear that you want to do median plus 5% or use average or 60th percentile. We would prefer to have some kind of direction. I think the only other secondary thing is that a great many organizations would look at your benefits and say that we're happy that they add to and don't detract from our total package, but might not want to actually set salaries. Factoring that in, focus more on base salary, knowing that your benefits are equal to or stronger than the market, particularly since the two areas you gain is 100% health. So that's a difference in terms of practice, and then the performance pay, which is, I think only one other agency has that kind of pay.
Again, we're going to try to wrap it up, folks. Councilmember Shepherd.
Well, the only thing I'd like to see is this with averages as well.
Okay.
All right, so with that, Doug, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
If I could just ask fellow council members, I know that If you could funnel your questions to F&A committee members, any of the questions that have occurred to you, things you'd like to make sure get considered and perhaps be part of the recommendation that comes back, if you could get those to us before next week, I
Or
think we
more
could.
specifically to the chair of the F&A committee.
Yeah, excuse me, to the chair.
Well, and go ahead and, if you have time, entertain the conversation at your committees, but I'd like it, funnel it to me, and we'll have a discussion at F&A and bring a recommendation back.
Councilmember Sunwell?
I don't know if this ties into this specifically, but I was getting dreamy about having my employer pay 100% of my health care as a
They
self-employed
cut
guy.
your base salary back to become.
Fair enough. One of the things we had talked about when I first got on council is I know there's a provision within the code that allows council members, I think it would have to be at least 3, or maybe it's a majority, that are able by code to participate in this. And I don't know if that needs to be part of this it's in there, trust me.
Salary Commission's addressing that.
So, okay, so I'll hold off on that then. Okay.
Mayor, if I could clarify, the questions, I don't know if we want to direct them specifically to a council member. I think they should come to the council, the F&A liaison. That'd be okay with council, to ensure that they're getting coordinated and.
I suspect the chair would welcome that.
I have no issue with that.
Thanks.
Okay, so let's just direct them to the city clerk if we could, and then she'll consolidate those and provide them to the chair and the rest of the committee members. All right, with that, let's move on. Now it gives me pleasure at this time to introduce Jim Dugan from Parametrics for another presentation on capital project program management.
Council members, Mayor, I have a 11 by 17 handout I'd like to hand out.
Yeah,
It'll
if
be
you could
easier.
just give them to the clerk and we'll get them down. Thanks. Thanks, Jim.
So, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here this evening. My hope is, as we talk about the different delivery methods or tools to help with capital development, that I offer information tonight for you to consider as you consider other capital projects as you go forward. So first, a little context. My name is Jim Dugan. I work for Parametrics. I manage the Tacoma office of Parametrics, and it is an office of project managers that work in large public agency capital projects, augmenting staffs much like yours. I had the privilege to deliver a workshop at the most recent Washington City County Managers Association annual conference, which is where I met Bob Larson. And it was in that meeting that Bob asked me if I would come today and share with you information around different kinds of project delivery methods. As we talked about different kinds of projects that have needs for different kinds of delivery methods. So the real title is Alternative Public Works Contracting, and it is best defined by the Revised Codes of Washington 39.10. So you hear me refer to 3910 as we go forward. So tonight, in my agenda, lacking the A, I'm going to share with you from our perspective, now in my 5th decade of managing capital projects and in an unprecedented last 5 years of cost of doing business in the marketplace, and what that has done to all of us. It doesn't matter which city you're in, it doesn't matter what size of project, but we're challenged with managing the spending of money that was approved yesterday that can't afford what we promised tomorrow. And so finding ways to do that differently. So first, a little context around the market. So unfortunately, when we have a bullish marketplace, we also have what you see on the screen here. And it ends up being not an owner's market, and time ends up being the most expensive commodity. That the quicker you can get to market to buy labor and brick and mortar and glass and scoreboards and turf fields and steel, the less expensive it is. And so as time goes by, we have a combination of things that causes continued escalation in market conditions. And I want to, looks like we're not going to have the first letter to all of these titles, so bear with me. I want to separate 2 subjects, escalation and market conditions. So escalation, although some could argue that it's not 3, not 4, maybe it's 5, maybe it's 2, it's more than 0, it's less than 10, and there's a commodity of escalation that is a thing. And then there are market conditions, the cost of materials, the availability of subcontractors, the availability of general contractors. And when you add those 2 together, and for the multiple public agencies that I'm helping with their capital bond planning, we are planning for 8 to 12% increases in cost on capital projects year over year over year, at least for the next 5 years. I know it sounds like it's hard to believe because the new market indices show that it is receding. The cost to borrow private capital shows that it is increasing. And every other sign in the marketplace that says that we've peaked in 16, 17, and 18, and it is receding, is true with the exception of the I-5 Puget Sound corridor. And it is true in that corridor because we have capacitized. The demand for building is so much larger than the supply of labor and materials that the cost of doing business continues to increase. It has to relieve itself at some point, but there's no evidence right now that says that it's going to relieve itself. So we're trying to find other ways to take, for instance, a capital bond that was approved 2 years ago and use it for the purposes we promised 2 years from now. When tomorrow I'm buying less for my dollar than I promised yesterday. So that's what alternative project delivery is all about. How can we think differently, non-provincial, to manage our risk, to spend our capital, to deliver our promises? And there's such an economic change over time. So the result, this is happening left and right. I will go to my grave wondering why we can't design to a budget, and then why lately that happens to be all the owner's faults and not the architects and design teams that you hire for that. It drives me crazy. Staff is being poached from one to the other. We have much fewer of A teams, if you will, whether it be general contractors or design firms. And so we're drawing people from states that are a long ways away, and in some cases drawing down the lower C and D rated teams from the larger contractors that haven't played in our area lately. And it's primarily in the $30 to $50 million range of projects, construction cost, that's just big enough for the smaller ones to make the leap and just big enough for the bigger ones to want to come down and create some kind of strategy to take over market share. So it's packed inside that middle. $1 to $2 million world is not as strained. The $50 to $100 million world isn't as strained, but right there in the middle, we don't have enough labor and material to satisfy the demand that's in the market today. So, for those of us that have been in the public and private market for our entire careers, all of those bullets up there represent different ways to deliver a project, which means different ways to contract for design and construction services. Many of them, if not all of them, were originally either conceived or expanded in the heyday of the Boeing expansion in the Puget Sound region. We used every form of how to deliver a project with a high return on investment with what we were building. And so we practiced at a lot of this. I'm happy to say that in addition to design build, and there's three kinds, and I'll come back to that in a moment, and general contractor construction manager are two alternative methods of delivering a project that have pros and cons, and that's the thrust of tonight, is to share with you the pros and cons of those two different methods that are available to you as a public agency. So RCW 3910, the revised codes of Washington, authorized in 91, primarily for the Department of Corrections, the use of what we call today general contractor construction manager. But they did so by the legislature appointing the Capital Projects Advisory Review Board, CPARB, which a subset of that is the Project Review Committee, the PRC. The Project Review Committee is the platform that you would go to with a submission of an application, then a presentation, and then they decide to approve or not approve your selected method of project delivery. I am a member of the PRC. It's a 30-member team. We meet once every 2 months. The next time is this Thursday. In the last few years, it was not uncommon to have 1 or 2 alternative applications. These days, it's anywhere between 11, 12, 13, and we're running them back to back all day long. Alternative delivery is up because your ability to deliver your promise tomorrow can't be funded with the voters' approval of funds yesterday. And so finding other ways to do this is what this is all about. The Z-fold 11 by 17 that is in that brochure is what this slide is. And I want to just walk briefly. So earlier you heard a presenter talk about a 10,000 foot level. Well, I'm at 100,000 feet because these delivery methods are extremely complicated, but they have some fundamental pieces to them that I'd like you to remember as you consider different methods going forward. So design, bid, build. So owner carries 2 contracts, which means the owner warrants design. It assumes that design is complete, correct, and coordinated which it never was. And so the risk that comes out of that is borne by you as an owner.
And that's the method that the council has seen for all the projects that Snoqualmie has done to date.
So it tends to have the least amount of flexibility and the highest amount of risk. And anymore, as the market saturates and we're getting less qualified people that are participating in both design and construction, your risk profile is going up. It's a great delivery method for not very complex projects, pretty straightforward, not a lot of risk, and the design documents being pretty complete. It's still a viable one for particular projects. General contractor construction manager, I think we call it that because Oregon did this first and they called it CMGC, so we had to call it GCCM. We couldn't call it the same thing. But it in fact is a construction management team that has the ability to self-perform up to 30% of the work. And in the builder world, that matters when you control the dirt, control concrete, control steel, control envelope, you can control a schedule. So that piece is very inviting, but while it still has you carrying two contracts, one for the designer, one for the builder, and you still warrant design, it allows you to bring your contractor on qualifications, primarily qualifications only, with a very small pricing factor component. You bring them on in schematic design, and then together, you have your builder and your designer participating together to finalize your design documents. The whole goal there is that at the end of that time frame when you execute a construction contract, your builder understands the intent of the design, and 3910 gives them responsibility for understanding that intent. So if you have minor errors and omissions, your builder is accommodating that through their contingencies and allowances that they've built in as they have built that through the design phase. So it's a partnering agreement. It requires full transparency on both parts, you and them. But for that, you see everything. You see everything. You also have to participate a little more heavily from a staff standpoint right up front. So design build is another method. You'll see two of the three. I'll just name all three. You have the traditional method, which is primarily price-based. UW Husky Stadium is an example at a very high level of what that looks like. You have a process by which you ask multiple people to show you what they could do for your budget, and they all come back with their own ideas. It supports a lot of innovative thinking, but it's a fairly hands-off process for the owner, but it can handle any scale of project. Progressive design build, probably one of the most loved, if you will, by public agencies. You aren't required to have upfront programming and design documents. It's a two-step process. You select your contractor based on quals. You hire them to go through schematic design and design development with you to develop the concepts and the programming with you, at which point you cut them loose. They come back and tell you what it'll cost to design, to permit it and build it. The power to this one is, imagine in a market where you have 8 to 12% increase in cost year over year. Imagine that it takes about 10 to 12 months to design something, and in that time, 8 to 12% of what you had originally planned has just increased. But what if you could fix that price 6 to 7 to 8 months earlier? You're looking at hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars saved, not spent. It's a really important point to note about progressive. And then lastly, there's the bridging method, which you didn't include in our presentation, Bob, because if you had a design of a McDonald's and you wanted to put that design in 25 different locations, you just pick up your McDonald's design, hand it to your selected contractor and say, put it on these 25 sites. So pretty straightforward. The strength to these lies inside of what kind of work you have to do, what your risks could be with that work, and what method will help you minimize risk the most, for instance. If you're in the ground, which we all know is where the unknowns are, and it's never kind to an owner because you either own the land or you're responsible for it. But what if you could work with somebody where you had multiple contingencies and allowances, where you shared all of that and worked together to spend it for the changes in scope that isn't above your original approved amount, and that what you didn't need to spend, your contractor didn't keep, you could? What if you had a partner that could help you with that while you're in the ground in old infrastructure area or unknown infrastructure area? GCCM method is perfect for that. If you have a fairly straightforward design need with slight complications, but it's fairly expensive, looking at design build is a much more powerful tool for you to be able to progressive design build to work with that team player for a short period of time, to have a shared understanding of its programming, how many offices, how many closets, how many conference rooms, and how to manage that risk in today's market. Each one of these brings a different attribute. Now, at 61 years old, and having done this a few times, I can tell you honestly that if you have a really good design team, a really good builder, really good client, you guys don't misbehave, and if you all behave yourselves, then you could use any one of these delivery methods and it would go well. Multiple delivery methods have been designed over time because development teams don't behave well together, and it causes risk. And in that risk, and flanked by as many attorneys as you can imagine, everybody has come up with ways in which to manage that risk. Not bad, not good, just a different profile. Selecting the right delivery method for the right kind of project is a really essential component to alternative public works contracting. So that, I think there's a couple other things I want to show you. Oh yeah, so in the GCCM world, if you satisfy, this is statute requirements, there's 6 of them. If you satisfy any one of those statutory requirements, then the project review committee will approve your use of that as long as you have the appropriate skills and the capacity for those skills on your team. Historic building, complex or technical work environment. It's an occupied site. I mean, one can argue, and the PRC approves it, if you're out in the middle of Main Street, in the middle of your town, it's an occupied site, as an example. And in design build, just one of these 3. An example would be, and I'm facilitating this now for Chelan County PUD, but the removal, replacement, or rehabilitation of each of the turbine generators in each of the Rock Island and Rocky Reach dams. Pretty straightforward, but it's extremely specialized work. I think there's 3 companies in the world that do this, as opposed to just the United States. So it satisfies the first bullet. Progressive design build, these are just some things that I mentioned, but I want you to note that in design build, you carry one contract. It's with the general contractor because they have to bond for the work, and most design teams can't. The design team works for the general contractor, which means the contractor warrants the design, not you. Huge difference. And there are off-ramps in all of these, meaning you could go down these paths to a certain point, and if you decided that your selected contractor just isn't a good fit for you, or you can't really get to a point where you negotiate a contract successfully, 3910 allows you to off-ramp out of that and just go out to the bid market. So you can always go back to design, bid, build. These are just ways in which you can be less provincial, more innovative, and have shared partners as you manage risk together. And a really good slide to just hang on to is, if something needs to go pretty fast, design build is generally the direction we should look. You can read the rest of the lines there. The second ones to the right that are different color would be the next step you would go if you didn't actually go down each of those paths that are first to the right of the arrow. There's no magic in delivery methods. It still takes talented people. And it still takes honest and honorable partners. It still takes being really smart about how to do the work. But these tools help those kinds of teams manage different kinds of risk profiles. I think, Mayor, I think that's it.
Yeah, thank you, Jim.
Yeah.
I did want to note the one exception we did to the design bid build process was the Community Center YMCA, where we had an agreed upon operational partner that we basically did a lease-back agreement. We gave the whole project to them. We said, here's a fixed amount of dollars. You build the project to that. They went out and found the Wallace properties, Kevin and his dad that did the financing. They got the contractor that they'd worked with on a number of projects that they had a great relationship with, and the design team that worked for that contractor. And they delivered a project that, in our estimation, was more durable, but higher quality materials that met all our expectations and was on time, on budget. And
yep.
No risk to us, basically. Once they were done with the project, we basically purchased it back from them, and it worked quite well. So this is what we're wanting to explore, is if we can apply those similar approaches to other projects here for all the reasons you described. So.
Yep. And most important to me, especially in this senior level part of my career in alternative project delivery, isn't whether or not you consider parametric should you consider alternative delivery. I just want to say that out loud and on the record. It's that you have information to consider that could help you manage your risk with whomever it is that you hire. But that if you do consider an alternative project delivery method, 3910 will require you to bring on board a company of your choice that has those skill sets as defined by 3910, which is at least one successful project in the last 5 years of the intended delivery method. And then off you go. So,
do you want to speak to the next steps, Bob?
Yes. I pledged to bring it back to the committee, but I wanted to make sure council had at least an opportunity to review this in whole. We, as you know, we have this utility bond, and we have some cash, and we have some projects that we need to deliver on within 3 years. And in about 2 years from now, you're going to, well, less than that, you're going to be seeing another, perhaps potentially, series of projects. Another 2 years after that, maybe another series of projects, depending on where you want to go with the utility. But we have a lot of work. And the traditional, in my estimation, design, bid, build is not going to get us there. We need more, we need to do these things in less time, we need more flexibility, and we need to reduce our risk. And I think we've got examples of projects that we've done under the traditional design, bid, build that haven't worked out so well. And so that'll be the position of staff, is to bring back and recommend one of these other two alternatives that have been presented tonight, and then looking at obviously taking a look at the different companies that could provide us with the expertise to get us there.
and if I may, Mayor, just one other comment. That first step in my mind's eye is with staff, and especially you have a great PM, CM group inside your organization. Sit down and actually in a workshop work through each kind of project and which method, in your opinion, would work best.
Yes.
That would come first. Thank you.
So tonight was just intended primarily as an introduction to this language and vernacular about this different approaches, and for the sake of time, unless I'm outvoted by my council, of course, we'll pick it up at the Parks and Public Works Committee meetings and bring questions there and the conversation forward, unless there's a couple quick questions before we move on. Councilmember Shepherd, did you have something quick?
Does this, will this allow competitive bidding or not?
Yes.
Okay.
The GCCM method specifically requires 100% competitive bidding for all bid packages.
Okay.
The design build, however, does not. It doesn't require it. And the power to that is it gives your design builder the ability to pick and choose the teams they want to hit your budget, your schedule, and your program. They take on that risk.
Jim, Councilmember Shepherd's been one increasingly concerned when a number of smaller projects we do get one or no bids, and then we're back to opening them up. Where can you mention why that phenomenon is happening, not just for us, and speak to that?
So imagine a fishing boat with 10 lines out, and all of a sudden one of them hits a 50-pound salmon. The other 9 lines are just cut loose because they'll get in the way of losing that 50-pounder. So there's so much work in the marketplace that small businesses, medium-sized and large, have lots of options to take, and they're looking for the ability to park a team in one spot for 5 years instead of for 5 months. And so they're choosing their work. They have the ability to do so, and it won't be that way forever, but it is that way today. Now that said, 3910 allows you to do some pretty cool things. For instance, if in the RFQ process of selecting your builder, you write in the language that says the owner reserves the right at the sole discretion of the owner, that if only one applicant is received, that you reserve the right to move forward with negotiating with that one applicant. It doesn't require you to have to go back out to the market. You can choose to do so. Or if you receive 2 bids at the end of the day in the final pricing measure, if you can write language that says, if those 2 bids are more than 20% apart, then the owner reserves the right at the sole discretion of the owner to choose either one. That way you can beat the price bidding wars that take place out in the marketplace. So there's a huge level of flexibility inside of GCCM specifically, and a huge level of risk protection that takes place with design build. And the market's at capacity. I mean, I'm hiring today design firms and contractors to do work in Tacoma that come from Oregon, Alaska, Idaho, and now one from Montana. The rest of them just don't show up to the bidding table. they're busy. It won't always be this way, and as an owner, I will remember this day when that day comes around and they're all looking for work. But for today, representing an owner, we're looking at different ways to be able to bundle projects. Also, one last comment. So we have trouble finding $2 million, $5 million, and $10 million contractors, but we can show relevant work that can be related to each other. We can bundle those projects into one program of projects, solicit one builder, raise the size of the prize, draw them away from the smaller fish, and show them a 50-pound salmon. 3910 lets you do that. So most public agencies struggle with the fact that 3910 is as flexible as it is, as opposed to the reverse.
Great.
Sir.
Jim, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Again, we'll continue that conversation, Council. All right, with that, at this time, I'd like to appoint Colleen Johnson to the Salary Commission. If I have a motion in a second.
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 Who moved?
I moved.
He moved, I second.
All right, thank you. I have a motion and a second to appoint Colleen Johnson to the Salary Commission. Is there any discussion, Council? Or just quickly, we had one member who unfortunately had some personal family issues that came up that she very much regretted she had to resign, but couldn't carry through. So, all right, is there anybody from the public that would like to comment on this? Go ahead, Anna. On the appointment, yeah. Okay, thank you. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. With that, we move on to citizens' comments. At this time, is there anyone from the public who would like to comment on items that are not on the agenda? Again, folks will have 3 minutes. Citizens have the right to have their elected representatives perform their duties on behalf of the city in an efficient, orderly manner, and that's why we restrict the time on comments. And I ask that you come forward, wait to be recognized, come to the podium, state your name and address, and direct your comments to the council as a whole, not to individuals. Is there anybody from, Anna, go ahead. Yeah, we'll do that. Up, yeah, there we go. Anna, go ahead.
Anna Sotelo, 7713 Center Boulevard, Southeast. Hi. I've made this request at the last 2 F&A meetings, and I believe I made it at the last council meeting as well. Tonight, I am here again imploring the council to please help fix the sign situation on Snoqualmie Parkway. We need people that are coming up and down the Snoqualmie Parkway to know that the merchants in the neighborhood retail center are here and how to find us. Second thing that I want to, and again, I guess I'm going to keep on coming until I see it on an agenda. And it's just been promised and promised, and it's really become frustrating at this point. Second thing I wanted to bring up was 2 weeks ago, the budgeting meeting was recorded, and I'm just curious, when will the recorded budget meeting be uploaded? I believe it was recorded on September 10th, and I'm just confused if it's not going to be uploaded. I've been told that it's something that I need to make a public records disclosure for, and that's just, I really don't want to be doing that anymore. Okay, good. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Anna. Is there anyone else like to speak at this time? Yeah, no, you do not need to make a public records request. That needs to get uploaded, if it has not been already. All right, see no one else move forward, we will move on to the consent agenda. All items listed below have been acted by one motion. Action items include minutes for the September 10, 2018 workshop and regular city council meeting. Also includes other approvals include Agenda Bill 18113, Professional Services Agreement with SCJ Alliance Incorporated to perform a pavement condition index survey and prepare a pavement management plan for maintenance of the city's pavement network. Agenda Bill 18116, Amendment to the Youth Sports Facility Grant Agreement for the Snoqualmie Skate Park Project. Agenda Bill 18118, set a public hearing on the 2018 Annual Progress Report for the City of Snoqualmie Floodplain Management and Repetitive Loss Plan for October 22nd, 2018 at 7 p.m. or soon thereafter. And Agenda Bill 18121, Resolution 1467, approving the City of Snoqualmie's allocation for the Northeast King County Regional Public Safety Communications Agency, otherwise known as NORMCOM, 2019 budget. Do I have a motion, Council?
So moved.
I have a motion and a second by Councilmember Ross. Any discussion, council? Or I'm sorry, at this time, is there any member of the public that would like to comment on these items prior to action? Seeing no one move forward, any discussion, council? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. We move on to reports. I want to make a note to congratulate Councilmember Shepherd on achieving her Certificate of Municipal Leadership from the Association of Washington Cities. I think you're required to get 30 credits for that, and I think you made it in record time. It's pretty impressive. I don't know that anyone has achieved that in a little more than 6 months, so kudos to you for doing that and for the commitment of going to a number of those courses, classes, and retreats and conferences and so forth. Moving on to Parks and Public Works Committee, Agenda Bill 18114, Agreement for the Consultant Services with Gray and Osborne for Water Reservoir Improvements.
The city's original 12/14/2015 design contract with Gray and Osborne for the Water Reservoir Improvements Project did not include construction management services, as the city staff plan to fulfill those services in-house. However, this project requires specialized expertise with regard to inspections of paint, application, and welding, which current city staff does not have. There are sufficient funds within Fund 417 to pay for this consultant contract. Move to approve agreement for consultant services with Gray and Osborne for Water Reservoir Improvements Project and authorize the mayor to sign.
Need a second, folks.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve Agenda Bill 18114 as stated by Councilmember Sunwall. Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this item prior to action? Sorry. Anna.
Anna Sotelo, 7713 Center Boulevard Southeast. Just after sitting through that meeting, I just had a few questions that kind of popped through my head. One, I'd like to say, just thank God it's not petite. So I'm really thankful to see that we're going with a different direction. But I'm really, you like that. I'm really concerned though with, I guess I'm really concerned with the rest of the CIP list. Because now that it looks like we're using in-house engineers and we're not using, is this going to come up on every project that we didn't include the cost and that our engineers can't oversee this kind of work? So I'm just concerned in seeing how the CIP list over the past few years, there are always these soft costs, soft costs, soft costs. I'm worried that that's going to be the same situation. I guess my question for you to be asking is how many of the projects that are on the CIP right now list do we can't oversee with our engineers? So I guess that's my concern.
All right, is there anyone else like to comment on this item? Seeing no one else move forward, council, do you have any questions, or will Brian go ahead and we'll queue it up with you?
I have a question for Brian. Maybe you can repeat the answer that I asked in committee kind of on this topic is, can you just give a recap? This goes a little bit to some of the public comment that's occurred tonight. Can you help us understand, again, just as you did in committee, why at one point we thought we could do this and then we decided we couldn't? Or was there something that came up in the project that we didn't anticipate and never thought we could do it, and that was what this was? And then maybe expand upon, at a broader level, do you see this being an ongoing issue with contracts that are sort of already in place? There were a few questions.
Yeah. The first was our intent with, when this project first came up, we had a couple other engineers, and the intent was to do the construction management in-house. We've had some success with other smaller projects. And when the topic of the, specifically the welding and the painting came up, we don't do that kind of specialized work in-house, and the consultant, Gray and Osborne, has the contacts to be able to do that better than us. So that's why this particular contract was important. It's because this is a, for lack of a better term, a one-off type project. We don't build a lot of water reservoirs around here, very, very rarely, and that type of inspection is just very specialized.
But when we decided that we were going to take on some of this in-house, did we not know that welding and painting was going to be a part of it?
The specific inspection, no. And that was not brought up to us from the design engineer or any of that, so.
Okay, so the recap is we bought off more than we chew. We didn't know entirely up front what we were going to be chewing.
That's a fair assessment.
Okay.
Councilmember Shepherd.
Don't we have a lot of the, most of our projects, don't we have some sort of a percentage of buffer for unexpected expenses on projects? I mean.
Like a contingency.
A contingency,
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, when we initially do projects, we'll just talk about the CIP since it got brought up. It's an estimate. The engineer, whether we do the estimate, typically it's a consultant that does the estimate, and that's what gets put in the CIP. Yes, there is some typical percentage of contingency, 10 or 20% usually, but we really don't. Those are just kind of a estimate placeholder, if you will. When the project actually goes out to bid and we get the bids back, that's when we get actual number. Like if our estimate's 2 million and it comes back as 1.5, well, great, now we have an extra 500,000. If it goes the other way, then we need to figure something out. And usually we come to you guys and say, what do you want to do?
Councilman Ross.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
In this particular case, the number that was in the budget, I would have to go back to see if it had a contingency with it, but I know that this does not have an effect on the 417 fund specifically, that we have a number of projects within that fund.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Councilman Ross.
So is this just for inspections, or is it for additional construction management?
Correct. It is for both. So the inspections and some construction management, which included submittal reviews and RFI reviews as well. And that's shown in the, I believe it's the exhibit B.
Right, I have that.
Yeah.
So like coding for $45,000, is that inspection, or is that, what is that?
That is inspection. That's for the paint inspection.
Okay.
So sorry.
Councilman Shepherd, then Councilman Mayhew.
So when the job's done, we're going to get an engineer stamped and certified that they've inspected this, right?
Correct. We'll get a certification from the paint inspector and the welder.
Welder.
We'll get a report.
Okay.
My apologies, Councilman Mayhew. I should have done round robin before. Right back to Shepherd.
So two areas I want to ask questions about. First is the budgeting. So Fund 417. Am I right that that's a utilities capital fund?
Correct.
So in a capital projects fund, we have a whole set of projects that we line up to do, right? And then we go and find funding to do those. Funding might come from a bond. It might come from rates that are greater than the operating costs, but we line up a set of funding for a set of expenses over a horizon that we have these projects planned for, right? So I'm kind of troubled by this idea that there's funds within the fund to pay for it, because don't we really have a $55 million capital projects plan that covers 6 years or so? And so really, if we have money that we overspend on one project, we're either going to have to underspend on another project, or we're going to have to find some other revenue source to get the set of projects done, right? It's not like an operating fund that at the end of each year or each biennium just expires. We've either used it and we get a new pot of operating money. This is money that just lives on through the capital plan, right? So when I read that we have sufficient funds within the fund, I find that to be sort of an irrelevant sentence, because the question is, how's this going to affect the rest of our capital plan, the other projects, and the funding for that set of projects? Can you kind of maybe speak to that notion?
Well, yeah. The fund within a fund. There isn't necessarily a fund within the fund, but as I was explaining to Councilmember Shepherd, that there are
You said fund within fund.
estimated numbers in the CIP, ones that we haven't gone out to add, so we don't know what the actual numbers are. When we go out to add and we get the actual numbers, they can be above or below. 99% of the time, they'll never be the same, as our estimate. They're going to be a little different. In this particular case, the reason why it doesn't have an effect on 417 is because we do have a project. I didn't want to get into detail of the exact account number, but we do have a particular project, specifically the pressure zone modification project, that is 400,000 and some change under of what the CIP shows. So that's how the 417 is not affected by this particular contract, because we have another project within the 417 that's significantly under budget.
Okay, so that helps me a bit, but shouldn't we look at all projects in 417 and ask ourselves if collectively we have under budget? Because you're referring to some other project that was under budget, pressure zone modification.
I just didn't want to get in the weeds.
No,
so.
well, and I'm not trying to get at the individual ones. I'm just asking for a concept answer. I don't need to know about all the different projects. But what I'm saying is if one project is under, I still have the nagging worry, but maybe another project is over. Don't we need to add them up and say net, do we have enough? Do we have left over that can cover this? So to your point, you're saying, well, some projects can be over, some are under. I get that. So that's what I'm asking you to speak to. So collectively, where do we stand net? Are we net of our projects under such that this will leave us still under, or can you sort of get at that?
Okay. Yes. And that's really a tough question, because some of the projects that are on the CIP have not gone out to add. They aren't not going to go out to add till later this year, early next year. So if you're basing on what real number of projects that we have, we are still under with the real numbers that we have.
Okay, so if we leave the estimates as estimates where we don't have any better information, we just leave those as they are. We take those that we do know, we've got enough under, we add them all up, net, they're under by an amount at least as much as covering what you're asking for here.
Exactly.
Okay, that satisfies my budget question. And then my other question was, I just want to get a sense as I think about all those other projects. Do we have potentially in those projects other welding or painting expertise needs that, let me try and ask this a little differently. What I'm wondering is $90,000 is a fair amount. If we had 2 of those a year, we could probably hire an engineer that might have those skills. So how have we tried to ascertain if those other projects, if we might have made this, if we, I'm going to use my words carefully, if we might not have realized we have specialized needs for welding and painting inspections in other projects, such that if we went and identified all that, we'd discover, hey, maybe we could do this in-house by hiring someone as opposed to contracting. Have we done, how have we gotten satisfied that we don't have a bunch more of these sort of, so that we're all going to be looking at these every few months now?
I agree.
For the same sort of topic.
I totally agree. Like I said before, these things, we're not in the business of building water reservoirs on a regular basis. Therefore, the welding and the painting are a little off. And we have had a discussion within staff about looking more critically on the projects, just in case we have these specialty things. But with the projects that we have going on and have coming up, they're typical. I don't want to say typical, but because all infrastructure projects are different in their own way, we don't have specialty work like that. It'll be sanitary sewer, excavation, pavement, sidewalk, that type of thing.
So this statement that you made earlier, I wrote it down, one-off, I think you said. You really are comfortable that this is a one-off?
This particular one is a one-off, But myself and other staff are looking more critically at the different projects, even with regular infrastructure, saying, do we have anything special or different that we have to consider, that we should consider?
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Sunwell.
So I would continue to implore you guys to tell the story here. As I tried to explain in committee meeting, I think it's important that what was the thing that was saved money on that allowed this to happen?
Another utility
The
project.
pressure thingy,
Yeah.
right? Call it a pressure thingy, I don't care. But if you haven't been able to tell, this council wants that second level of information. We want that story to be told, and the reason I know we want that is because these questions come up every single time. And so if we can just build that into the agenda report or the bill itself in a sentence or two, because of savings we had with the whatchamacallit thingy, we now have extra money to spend on this. And to Jim's point, based on what has gone to bid already, we are within our budget, blah, 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 right? And I think if that happened, you guys will get this. These conversations will not happen much. It'll revert back to where it was with the prior council that I only had about 6 months to be with, but where the institutional knowledge starts to catch up, but at the same time, we're getting the information that I guess what I'm saying is this council is asking for a different set of information points than maybe prior councils have. And the quicker you guys catch on to that, the shorter these conversations will be, and you'll get to sit down a lot quicker. Which I think you'd be totally comfortable with.
It's fine with me.
Councilmember will say.
I'm just going to reiterate that last comment, because I think what we talked about in committee was that looking at it in terms of like balancing our budget. I think this council is really concerned about budget. I think this council is really concerned about how we're spending the city's money, and I think that's important. So when we get to these sort of things, it's not, and I think everyone here's, and at least I'll speak for myself because I don't want to speak for the whole council, but I'm willing to, I agree that we have sufficient funds for this project. I agree that it's there, but I'd like to see it documented in some way that gets a simple answer. So if it's a matter of saying the fund has this much money and we anticipate this amount will be used for other projects and we anticipate there's this much left and this project fits right in there, we're at a positive at the end, everything's good. I think that level of detail is what this council is looking for. And as Councilmember Sunwell said, the conversations go a lot faster that way, and we don't have to go into it all the time. So I think if we can get into that sort of reporting on every agenda bill when it comes to a budget item, we'll get there. So I just said what he said, but that's what he said.
Okay. There being no further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. I would just,
Good night, Brian.
also caution the council to keep in mind to not sacrifice the good to on the altar of the perfect. And we need to keep things moving at times too. And I mean, everything's not going to be. I mean, sometimes an agenda bill things are not in perfect form. But a committee, this conversation can get it to where everybody understands it. And I clearly understand what the council members are saying, and we're going to get there. We're going to be patient with that. But I'm also cognizant that everybody's frustrated with the length of the meetings and that we got a lot of things piling up. Sometimes maybe it doesn't have to be in perfect form to keep just pushing forward, and we just keep working on getting things better over time. So.
I think what was suggested, Mayor, is that actually this would help streamline things.
I understand.
And in 18 months, I don't think anyone's asked for less information.
I didn't want to add to the time of the meeting, sorry. Is there any other reports for Parks and Public Works Committee? Any other report for Parks and Public Works Committee?
Oh, I'm sorry. Got lost in the laughter. No, I think we're good.
All right. Community Development Committee, Agenda Bill 18117, Second Amendment to the Kimball Creek Restoration Agreement in the Mountains to Sound Greenway.
The city received and accept, nope, wrong.
I think that's right. That's right.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
I understand that the chair of the committee was not there at the time this agenda bill. Is it the chair of the committee or the acting chair that should read this agenda bill?
I just want someone to read it in.
Go for it.
Councilmember Jeans, you're on the docket to read it in. Well, yeah, you can.
I nodded to Jim. He started to read. We're just doing fine.
Okay, go for it.
The city received and accepted a $78,023 King County Flood Control District grant. Services to achieve grant deliverables were split among multiple parties, with the deliverables for $16,308 approved under Agenda Bill 17-087 for the Kimball Creek Restoration Cooperative Services Agreement with Mountains to Sound Greenway. The intended providers of the other two grant deliverables are not able to meet requirements. This amendment consolidates all grant deliverables with Greenway within the grant amount, and so amends the Greenway agreement scope and amount to match the grant total of $78,023. The expenditures equal to the grant amount are already budgeted in Planning Fund number 130, and so this amendment does not change the existing budget and appropriation. Move to approve the second amendment to the Kimball Creek Restoration Agreement with the Mountains to Sound Greenway and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve Agenda Bill 18117 as stated by Councilmember Mayhew. Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this item prior to action? Seeing no one move forward, is there any discussion, Council? Councilmember Lissay.
I just want to, I asked that this be taken off consent and discussed, just because I want to make sure that during discussion during committee, it was unclear that the dollars were there. Nicole did a great job of explaining that, and I understand that. I want to make sure that it was clear to everyone that this wasn't a increase in budget, this wasn't an increase of appropriation, this was just a matter of consolidating so that it was taken care of. So,
from multiple contractors to one.
Yes.
Okay. Any further discussion, Council? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Is there any other report for Community Development Committee?
No other report.
Moving on to Finance Administration Committee, we have the warrants. Can someone please make a motion to approve the warrants?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the warrants. Any discussion?
This week I was able to get through the warrants that we are approving tonight for the first time, and found a number of items on that I have questions about. And so the total that we are approving tonight is over $2 million. And I have several questions, and I'm sure that you're not going to have patience for all of them, so I thought I'd go through a couple and then just leave the rest for the Finance Committee. But one of the things I wanted to point out is I have been talking to the State Auditor's Office about my wanting to look at the warrants, and they encouraged me.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Shepherd, I'm going to pull back and check in with council, because my direction to the council's direction to me was that they wanted a protocol where you would take your questions to the F&A committee. You did not submit any questions to the F&A committee this past week, either by email or orally.
Point of order.
Go ahead.
Okay, I've been told that I am able to talk about this to the, during a council meeting as a council member, period, and they don't need approval from other council members in order to bring my concerns up about any particular warrant.
Okay, proceed. I'll defer to the majority of the council as to whether they want to call a question or anything. So.
Okay, so the State Auditor's Office explained to me that the rights of looking at warrants has to do with whether I'm a resident or not, and not whether I'm a council member.
Point of order, Mayor. In my view, this topic is not germane to the question of approving claims against the city and these warrants. Discussions about what the state auditor thinks about various things.
Yeah, sustained.
All right. So we have a number of checks that do not have any numbers associated with them. And I'd like to get a better understanding of why we don't have that. Of the numbered checks that we have, down to this. So the questions.
So, question, Pete, do you have questions in regards to the validity of the claim or the amount paid?
The claim, yeah. One of the claims is for check number 46288. Yeah, 46288. And it has no water at Snoqualmie Point Park, and we're spending $628 for a flushing toilet for a wedding event. And my question is the city being compensated for this, and how often is this happening?
Point of order, Mayor?
Yeah.
Whether or not the city's being compensated for that is not germane to the question of whether that is a valid claim against the city, whether the services were provided.
Sustained. And furthermore, I would say without the council member having provided the staff or the rest of the council with materials to review, I'm not sure how they could do an audit in a public council meeting.
Mayor,
Yes,
if there's
sir.
a question about whether or not there's a running water at Snoqualmie Point Park, we do in fact have running water. We have toilets and we have running water up there.
So we had a check for a porta potty, basically, because they say we don't have water there, according to the warrant.
Again, you haven't provided documentation to the staff or the councils for us to review the particulars. I mean, there's running water and restrooms on the park, but we're not sure the particulars of what you're talking about to be able to.
Point of order,
effectively-
Mayor.
Yes, sir.
This discussion does not appear to me to be germane to the question of whether the claim against the city that is paid by that warrant is valid.
Okay. The point of order is sustained. The council member will keep the comments related to the approval of the warrants.
So we have, we got a best parking lot, 46292. And the reason that we were having this service come in is because our city sweeper is damaged. And I was wanting to know if we're going to be able to repair the sweeper.
Point of order. This has, whether we have a functioning street sweeper has nothing to do with whether services were rendered.
Sustained.
Okay.
Council member will keep the discussion focused on the approval of the warrants.
So my questions in general have to do with how do things get paid? For instance, we have expenses that we're paying to NHC for services having to do with what appears to be developer fees, and I wanted to know if we're being reimbursed for those fees.
So per the process we discussed, I request, send me those in written form so that again, same thing in committee. I can't answer these in flow. I've got to go ask the question and have staff do some research as appropriate. To pop them on the fly and expect an answer on questions like this is just not going to happen. So I request that you submit those to me in writing. We will disposition them in F&A per the agreed upon process by council. And based on that, I'd like to call the question.
Okay, what?
Second.
Sorry. If the question's been called, we stop debate and then put the call of the question to a vote. I have a motion and a second to call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay, the motion passes 6-1. So with that, all discussion is complete, and we'll move on to a vote on the main motion, which is the approval of the warrants. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Again, the motion is approved 6-1. All right, with that, any other report for Finance Administration Committee?
No report.
Public Safety Committee report.
I do have a report. So today, the Public Safety Committee, along with Chief Carrera, Mayor Larson, and City Minister Bob Larson, we met with the Falls City Commissioners to further discuss the possible partnership between Falls City Fire District 27 and the City of Snoqualmie Fire Department. And basically, we talked about different things like governance and cost sharing and apparatus and staffing and things like that. But at this point, the Falls City Fire Department is planning to go through the process of putting on the ballot to merge with Fire District 10. So they'll consider our discussion, but they're going to move forward with the other option. So we see that Snoqualmie will probably be Plan B if the ballot doesn't pass.
Councilmember Sunwell?
Is it possible to have Chief Correa answer a question or two?
Sure.
About that?
Well, and maybe you can answer it too. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to direct questions to you or not. But maybe you guys can tag team.
Okay.
I'm just really curious. It's been a couple months since we had this conversation last. That seems to be a relatively quick dismissal of what I thought was a 50-50 chance on that. Did things change in the month or whatever, two, since we discussed the infamous options 1 through 3 and 4, or am I just reading
I think the
too
only
much
one that was
into it?
infamous was option 4.
We're never doing an option 4 ever again. No option 4.
So we've had 2 meetings with Falls City Fire District 27. The first one was probably about a month and a half, 2 months ago. It was
Okay.
left in their court to respond to us. They responded about a month ago, and this was the follow-up meeting. It takes some time to get some schedules. We only really had 2 meetings, elected official to elected official. We did our best to answer their questions. I think we provided some really good information today. Provided information that actually met the requirements that they were looking for, like was the city open to having a conversation about sharing the governance or oversight? What would the cost be? But they're taking that information, they're going to go back and consider it, but it was pretty clear going into today's meeting that they were leaning more towards the King 10 option, which would bring them to Eastside Fire and Rescue.
And
Mark, if I
what's
could
the timing
clarify-
of that ballot? Is it too late for November?
Right, it'd be early next year.
Okay.
Maybe February or April. They weren't sure.
If I could clarify that, the Chief's comment, they were leaning towards that before we had our meeting today.
Yeah.
It didn't come as a result of.
Correct.
We were of that belief anyway.
They seem to have been leaning that way for quite a while, even
Okay.
before our meeting in July with them.
Okay, so okay. So
There was a
this
lot
is
of
not a
internal,
surprise.
there was a lot of internal pressures for them to look at the King 10 option more seriously than the Snoqualmie option. I'll just leave it at that.
I like that.
So,
Cool. Okay, thank you.
Stay up there, Chief Carrera, in case there might be a question on the next thing. So we are, the Emergency Management Group has developed a draft drone ordinance, and the focus is on takeoff and landing regulation under land use authority instead of airspace, which is regulated by the FAA. And so he's looking to put together a focus group, and I think right now you have about 7 members, and they include like 2 people from Cairo 7, King County Search and Rescue, and what was the other one? Actually, the fire department. And so you're looking for additional members to help bring expertise and.
correct, yeah, we have a couple of residents from the upper Snoqualmie Valley that are hobbyists, and some of them are actually certified to operate Part 107 certified to operate drones commercially, which is similar to what we're doing internally in the fire department, police, and IT as well. So we are planning on sending out the draft ordinance in the next day or 2 to that focus group and start an electronic conversation around the document. Like the council member indicated, we're focusing on the land use, landing, takeoff. We can't regulate the airspace. That's not our duty. That's not a local jurisdictional issue. That's a federal issue. But our goal is to really look at this from get out ahead of it before, as the price point drops and these items become more popular. Instead of reacting to that, we want to be out ahead of it, looking at where the best places are to use these in the community, but then also empowering the public if they feel they're being harassed by drones, that it gives the city some sort of enforcement power over that. So we're trying to take a holistic approach to this, and we're hoping the focus group can really help us dive down into these questions.
All right, thank you, Chief.
Does the focus group need to be residents, or could it be other folks outside of that? Because I think might find a lot more expertise, or hobbyists that have from smaller to larger drones and understand the complexities of those.
Yep, exactly. That's what we want. Our goal is to have a good mix of people on that, everything from commercial operators to hobbyists. Okay. In fact, this group may end up evolving into supporting our drone operations internally, potentially being able to tap into their expertise to answer our questions or to help us with our program as well. So, yeah, we've got people from North Bend. I was reached out by somebody from Issaquah today, and then also some people that live on the ridge. Person reached out to me last week that's building his own drones and working on technology supporting it. So, I mean, we have a wide breadth of people that are interested in being part of this group. Pretty exciting.
Thank you.
Councilor Sumwell.
I think I might have forgotten my question. I know it is. Currently, does the city of Snoqualmie have anything in the code, one way or the other, about drones?
I'd have to ask the city attorney that, but not to my knowledge, no.
Okay.
So some agencies like Bellevue had model aircraft language in their municipal code because they have that area in Marymore Park that they use, and they added drone to their definitions to accommodate that. So that hasn't been contested yet. So
I guess my hope would be, I'm not an enthusiast. I have one. It's been a while since I've used it, but I've seen municipalities, in my opinion, dramatically overreact in a very negative way to drone usage. State parks do not allow them to take off or land, just kind of a blanket thing. And I hope, and it sounds like I have great faith that the approach you're taking will do that, but I do think there's a great opportunity to allow people to do that within reason and still protect the privacy of citizens. So I like the approach you're going about it with rather than maybe how the state approached it. So.
okay, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
All right, with that, we're going to move on to Committee of the Whole. And I want to ask you guys to help me kind of get straight what we had decided at the edits of the budget. Councilmember Mayhew, you had asked to reverse the order of which items in particular?
So that the budget discussion happened first and then the.
Okay, so we kind of get the big ticket item and see if we have time for the smaller. Okay.
Point of order, is it
Councilmember Ross?
possible to take a break for like 5 minutes?
That was proposed. I thought you guys might want to keep moving because we're doing amazingly well at 8:35, but we could do that. We could take a quick break. Let's do like a 4-minute recess and try and get back here at about 22.
How many executive sessions do we have today?
Three.
Estimated total time?
That's what I'm trying to estimate total time. Half hour. All right. Council is now back in session. With that, I'll turn it over to Robert to discuss the 2018 budget status and financial condition.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So I just passed out this is per a statutory deadline that the mayor actually presents his budget. By this date, it's a preliminary budget only to the city clerk. And so this is pretty much an internal document. We still have some work to do on the budget, as you are probably aware. There's a lot of steps between here and there. So again, this is a preliminary guideline only. I do think staff, they spent a lot of time on this. So I'm going to go over what's in this document, what's going to change later. And what you can see, what I passed out here, and I won't go through every single one, but this is the actual fund schedule that we presented to the city clerk. And what you can see on that schedule is estimated beginning fund balance for 19, so what we're estimating for the year end. And we worked really hard with departments to kind of pinpoint where we're going to actually be at the year end. Estimated revenues in 19, estimated expenditures in 19 per fund, estimated fund balance in 19, and then you see estimated revenues in 20, estimated expenditures in 20, estimated fund balance in 20. This is different than we've done the budget in the past. If you look at cities like Issaquah, Bellevue, and some other cities here, this is more of how their ordinance ends up being passed. So we're trying to go that direction. We're also trying to go the direction of an actual 2-year budget, and that's what we're building here. And so this is kind of the building blocks of the budget. So this will be the first of many discussions. Yes, Councilmember.
So you don't add together.
Councilmember Shepherd, if you could please use the microphone.
So you're not adding together the estimated beginning fund balance and the estimate revenues, right?
Yes.
We do
Yes.
not.
You're going across.
So you can, so 39 million is not part of 52 million.
I'm sorry?
I'm trying to figure out if there's something additive here, or if they're just.
Oh, okay, so that's the fund balance that we're starting with. So 19, so we're ending 2018, we're starting 19. This is money that's not budgeted, so this is behind the scenes money, $52.4 million. What we're estimated to receive in 19, which is separate from that, that's that second column.
So that's additional.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so if you go across, it's beginning fund balance plus the revenues minus the expenditures, then your ending fund balance. Yes, Councilmember Lassay.
Okay. I'm a checkbook balance guy. I say that all the time.
Sure.
So if I take our first column and I add our second column and I subtract our third column, does that equal the fourth column?
Yes.
That's okay. Just thought it the right way. Okay.
And so again, this is a lot of information because this is every fund in the city that we're continuing to. As part of this process, we've done a lot of house cleaning on the inside. So what we've done is we've cleaned a lot of accounts that have not been used. We're actually deactivating several funds that say have $10 in it. We're making sure it's sweeping in. So we're trying to be as transparent as possible in this process. And going forward, I'm going to talk about a little bit of some assumptions that we've already built into this. And some capital spending, for example, that we've already built into this budget. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what's going to come to council later here. And so the mayor's preliminary budget, again, this tonight fulfills a statutory requirement for the mayor to deliver the budget to the city clerk. So again, all the work is still to come with the budget workshops later. This includes updated revenue assumptions, including assessed valuation for property tax. And we just received that. It might make some of you sad because it's not that high, but we were anticipating the slowdown in construction this year. Balanced budget includes set-asides for a targeted reserve policy of 20% and also for capital funds. Now, the council policy right now is below 15%. 15% is pretty much acceptable there. Because there's some uncertainty in the economy in 2020, and also just that the council, does come up with some additional funding or additional capital projects in the future, we felt that taking 20% of total general fund expenditures and making sure that we're setting that aside was prudent business going through this budget process here. So we want to be as responsible as possible.
Where is that 20% shown on here? Or is it?
It's actually, I'm going to go through that. It's part of the fund balances if you add 1, 2, 3, and 4. So if you add those 4, the first 4, that's where the fund balance. No, I'm sorry. Fund 1, 2, 3, and 4 is where the fund balance is coming from.
Okay, got it.
Includes all base budget increases requested by departments. So I think I mentioned this couple workshops prior, we had departments, we built base budgets, we sat down with all the departments, fine-tuned them. All the departments are actually going to be presenting their budgets this week to the mayor. But what we did with the base budget increases, we put assumptions, and I'll talk a little bit about, assumptions for inflation in there and just the basic cost of doing business. So these are internal increase requests just to keep the status quo budget. This does not include any new items coming. And it also does not include, budget proposals, I call it enhancements, but budget proposals nor a finalized capital program. So again, this is just the status quo is what you're seeing in the department budgets I'm about to present for general fund. And then more detail and discussion, of course, will occur at the 4 scheduled council workshops.
Quick question for you.
Yeah.
Just on, maybe I shouldn't get in the weeds and you'll get to it as we get to it, but some of these include services and other funds that don't have, are maintained, but there may be negotiations going on. Just use like the North Bend Police Services as an example.
Exactly.
Are you just using this as a placeholder based upon current?
Right. So right now, if everything held constant, this is what is there, because we actually have some funds that, we're waiting for the state to charge us for some money or waiting for the state to give us some revenue. So there's some funds that will change between now and the past budget.
Okay. Yeah, I see 2 or 3 that could be in that category that's going to be, they'll be in flux through the budgetary years, therefore.
Oh, correct.
We're going to, okay.
Right, and there's some funds, again, on the general fund side and the operations funds, we're trying our best to build a 2-year budget that we don't have to come to council for a lot of budget amendments during the year. But like you said, there's some, as far as, if you have a lawsuit or if you have unanticipated expenditures on certain of the special revenue funds or an unfunded mandate coming from the state, we're seeing that a little bit with utilities. Those we would come back for a budget appropriation at that time. Okay. But right now, in a departure from past practice, this pretty much a summarized schedule of this is what you're going to see actually passed as an ordinance when we get closer to the end of November. Again, we're not going to appropriate the entire fund balance of each fund. We're going to appropriate what we think is going to be spent during the year. So that's our goal right now during the 2-year process.
Do we have that?
I'm sorry?
Do we have that?
Have what?
Do I have that document somewhere?
I can email this to you.
Okay.
This one here? Yeah.
Yeah, I like that one a lot better.
Simple.
Fewer lines.
Yes.
No, please email your presentation to the full council.
This might have been just created, but you don't have to tell anybody. So yeah, I wanted to show just a roll-up of, here's the budget summary. And again, same columns I just mentioned, but you start with the general fund. So you can see we started with a general fund balance we're estimated at 1.1 million. This does not include any of the transfers out. So you can see general reserve funds, special revenue funds, we do a lot of transfers out at the end of the year. So just the general fund only, 1.1 million, estimated revenue of 14.3 million, estimated expenditures 14 million, and then you can see ending fund balance of 19, we're estimating 1.4, estimated revenues 15.2, and you can see from there, and I'll go through just a little bit of the basic details here. General reserve funds, so again, on the sheet here, those are funds 2, 3, and 4. That includes strategic reserve funds and also funds that we set aside from construction. And Mark Hoffman and I worked today on some of the assumptions going into 2020, and we updated some of those numbers for the reserve funds since the last time I've been in front of the council. So you can see where we have strong reserve funds, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, that we have some discretion as far as, what we want to do for capital spending, what we want to do for other projects here. But again, the key here is sustainability. If we do have a weak 20, we want to make sure we're going in there strong. That's why we're trying to make some assumptions on the general fund I'm going to get to in just a moment here. And capital funds, that does not include a utility, so you can see just general capital funds. And some of those numbers will go up. We're still working with the Parks and Public Works Department on the CIP portion of that. And then utility funds, you can see we just got we actually just sold the utility bonds, and so of course we're starting kind of front-loaded with that money, and then we go further. Councilmember Sumner.
So I don't know if now is the time or when we get into budget is the time, but even my small math brain can see that our ending balance declines over the next 2 years.
That's correct.
I'm sure there's a fantastic answer for that. And if it's best, sir, wait till we discuss it when we get into our budget stuff.
I'm going to talk about it a little bit.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll answer some of your questions hopefully tonight. Yeah, Councilmember Shepherd.
I think I've got the same question. Those, of the 3 reserve funds, I see that 2 are going to be staying the same, and then the third one is going to be going down.
Correct. That's special revenue funds, so that includes grant funds as well. You're talking special revenue on the third line?
Well, this, I'm looking at the bigger one, and
Okay.
it says revolving reserve fund.
Yes. So I programmed some money. I'm going to talk about that in just a minute here. But again, you're going to see this all. So we're going to come to the workshops. We're going to get into the detail of all of that.
Oh, good.
Yes. So mayor's preliminary budget, this is general fund revenue. So property tax, King County does not separate out the lid lift, so this is the levy for public safety plus the general property tax. You can see that we're estimating, if we do take the 1% increase, we're only estimating about a 3.6% change total this year. We do think we're going to see some increases next year with the townhomes coming online and also the Hampton Inn because it hasn't been evaluated yet. So we can see in that 2020 year, it should go up a bit more. But, you know, it's slower than the county as a whole because you have areas like Maple Valley, you have areas such as Kent and Covington that are still growing. We're obviously not seeing that growth, so the property tax is starting to slow back to that 1% curve right now until, you know, a few years out beyond this budget when you see the Salish expansion and others coming online. It's going to take a few more years for that to hit the sales tax, the property tax revenues. Utility taxes are second largest source, and again, I mentioned this at the last workshop. It's actually growing very strongly. We will be doing some analysis and some deeper forecasting on the utility tax, but it's quite strong when you think about, again, cable, cell phone, even people cutting the cord, they're still buying wireless technologies, they're still streaming somehow. So we're still capturing that in utility tax, and the utility tax is also helped by the rate increases. So we forecast some growth there based on the fact that when you look at water and sewer going up, you're seeing some of the in solid waste local rate increases. You're seeing that factor into the utility tax. So we believe that's a strong revenue source. Sales tax, and we will discuss this a little bit more during the workshops. Sales tax, you can see what I'm taking out. So I've actually took out all the construction in this number. So this is everything without construction in here. So again, general retail, restaurants, online shopping. You can see it's going up about I'm estimating about 9% increase for 18, and then 5% increase, as you can see, for the 19 budget. And then we're lowering it to 3% in 20, just because, again, 20 is the year that even AWC at the conference we attended last week, even AWC kind of sounded caution about 20 and actually warned some cities, hey, be very careful about how you budget 20. So again, we're taking measures to just make sure that if there is a slowdown, we are prepared for it as far as the revenues and what we're presenting to council.
Two quick questions. Why did you take out construction, or at least why didn't you put it in as a separate line item?
We have it in Fund 4, so we're actually, we're estimating it separately.
Okay. So my second question is...
One-time revenue, basically.
Yeah.
We're still treating it as one-time revenue, but
okay.
We're still, it's, you know, somewhat ongoing, but we're keeping it at a separate line item so it doesn't skew to the numbers. So
is the only restricted revenue source up there utility tax?
Utility tax, again, there's just a portion of it that's restricted based on council policy, and we're actually evaluating whether or not to go back to council on that policy. Almost all of utility tax is unrestricted.
Okay.
Everything up there transfers in, of course, you know, some of that's restricted. Intergovernmental revenue can be.
So far as it's a general fund tax.
It's the tax. It's not the revenue from utility. Gotcha. Okay, I got mixed up. Okay.
Councilor Mayhew?
We do have a small restriction on some of the money where we do transfer it, that based on a council policy that we're evaluating.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'd encourage us to start using, because we're going to have to get familiar with some limited amount of technical language. And so it turns out that one of the just really basic and important technical language pieces to understand is the word restricted. And so if I could just encourage us that it's defined in the accounting literature and in the state budget the state bars, the state law or the requirements on how we do our accounting. But restricted means some entity outside of the city has told us what we can do with that, restricted our use. If we, the council, if we limit the use of something, and we say, administration, you can't use this except for, well, maybe at all, or maybe for only certain purposes, the correct terminology for that is committed. Did I just drew a blank in the middle of my sentence. Committed.
It's committed.
Committed or assigned,
Thank you.
yes.
It'll help us if we try to carefully use the term restricted versus committed, because there's a fair amount of our revenue in this city that the council, our predecessors, or maybe some of you sitting at the table, have committed for certain uses. So it's actually not a not insignificant amount of what happens in our city. So it's good for us to know the difference between that which is committed, because that which a council commits, a council can uncommit or commit differently, versus a restriction, which we absolutely, there's nothing we can do about it. It is what it is. So when you talked about the one-time sales tax, the construction sales tax, so that's a council commitment that we do not allow administration to use that for operating purposes, but it's a council commitment, not a restriction.
You could hire new firefighters with your one-time revenue if you want. Probably not a wise thing to do, but.
Yeah, but he wasn't listening.
A lot of these were, to Councilmember Mayhew's point, a lot of these were previous council policies, and if, we pass a budget or the council decides that there's, some elements of the budget that might go against some of those policies, we're going to come back and reverse those policies as part of the budget process. But at this point, we're still, just for these purposes on construction, because it is volatile, of course. You never know what's going to happen.
I'm not, I am very impressed
Set
with our
aside
policy.
right now, yes.
Yeah, I'm not in any way criticizing the policy. Please don't misunderstand. I just want to make sure that we're aware
is right. Yeah.
as to what, is restricted versus what we have authority over.
And then I've talked before about online sales, and we had a graphic, but we'll present that graphic at a later workshop. We just didn't get to it today, and I apologize. Just about really, we actually isolated out, based on some questions last time, what the online sales category was. And again, it's, bucking the national average. It's a very significant part of just the general sales tax growth in the city. B&O, though, I do want to highlight there. That could change in the future with, businesses coming in or something else. So that's kind of, part of that's attributed to economic development. So if somebody, another company came to the business park, higher gross receipts, that could, help that number in the future. Yes?
Where in this chart is online sales?
It's embedded in sales tax.
Okay.
It's considered reoccurring.
And I don't have copies of this.
Okay.
And you can see the license permits and fees. Now one caveat to this and one discussion we're having internally is right now we have a community development fund that is separate that receives approximately $510,000 in general fund support a year. And we're discussing whether or not it should be included in the straight general fund, which would increase the license and permits, but also increase the expenditure side, of course. So those are some of the internal things that we're still working on.
Could you just go back
Sure.
one to this big guy? Or
I
is
don't
that up
have
there,
it
or
on
that's
here.
not?
No,
up
I don't
there?
have it on here.
So can I just ask you, so taking Fund 130, for example, on this big guy, that is, I think you and I have discussed that and how that fund works historically. And so while it shows as a special revenue fund, I believe that your sense is that that is probably unrestricted fund balance?
It is.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Just didn't want to put words in your mouth. So there are a number of funds, special revenue funds in particular, that perhaps are really general fund, are really unrestricted general fund, right? Are you, but for historical reasons, these funds were broken out and sort of have historically been utilized this way. I believe that you're looking at collapsing some of these funds into 001, to the extent that you end up doing that, are you planning to do that after this budget cycle or somewhere in the middle of the budget cycle, or how are you planning to?
We actually went through every single one of these funds,
Mm-hmm.
and there are some restrictions on some that will most likely take after this budget session, and we actually very carefully did. We collapsed a couple funds, like for example, we had a street overlay fund that was separate from streets. We're collapsing that into streets to increase.
So you've already done that in this chart?
We have, yes. There's
And
about
so-
7 funds that are not on here that were on here.
All right, so you've already done some of that, and then, like, for example, with Fund 130, you may do some more of that, is that right?
That's correct.
But
And we'll let council know if we do before the budget is passed, of course.
So you'll kind of.
Of course.
Walk us as you.
Always.
As you do that, okay, great, thank you. So I guess the point I was trying to get at is, for the accountants in the room, maybe there's only 2 of us, when we look down those fund numbers, those numbers actually tell us things about those funds, the nature of them, that, because we know how the numbering system works, which I think, am I right, you're not planning to try and teach this council all these fund numbers, but you're
This is the
planning to talk
statutory
to us.
requirement that we.
Yeah, no, exactly. You have to do it this way for the state, but you're planning to talk to us generally more in slides like this one that Councilmember Sundwall likes, right?
Yes.
Where you've kind of grouped
Yes.
up into things that, and you'll talk to us at that level?
Yes.
Fantastic.
Well, we could have a legend that would say funds 1 through this or this kind of a fund or.
Oh, no, it's way better what he's doing.
Oh, okay.
I was just trying to sort of alert everyone to what he's doing, which I think is personally, it's you guys' choice, but I think it's fantastic where he just makes it understandable for us. You guys, this has to be done for the state auditor, but I love the idea of make it understandable for us.
And so you see for 2019 over 18, we're at 3.7% increase. 2019 over 20, you can see, or 2020 over 2019, excuse me. You can see it's about a 6.3% increase. And you can see some of that increase is with the property tax coming online finally from Hampton Inn, from the townhomes like I discussed. That is bumping the number in later years. So here is the preliminary budget general fund expenditure summary. So administrative departments, again, this includes pretty much everything on the second floor here. City clerk's office, our administrative services department, our communications budget, our events budget, and
Planning, building.
no, they don't count. I was going to say, unfortunately, they don't count. They are on the second floor, though, yes.
Mayor, council.
And neither does Public Works Director.
Why is,
So mayor, council is, sorry.
why is non-departmental dropped?
I'm going to talk about that. Administrative departments, again, finance is part of that as well. So this is, cost to run the city there. You can see just moderate increases. It's pretty flat for 19 to 20. There was a hiccup there. It should have gone slightly up. I think there's a rounding issue. I apologize. But the percent is pretty flat going in from 19 to 20. Snoqualmie Police, so again, police services not including North Bend. You can see about a 4.9% increase the first year, 4% the second year. And again, this is with all the base increases, the cost of doing business built in here. So any inflationary increases, any healthcare increases, that's built into this number already. So you can see we're trying our best to have a responsible budget here. Parks and landscape maintenance, you can see that's down just slightly, but pretty flat there, going up just about 4.1% the second year there. Non-departmental, so this includes our transfers out. And what we're doing and why it's dropping is I'm actually moving some of the transfers from the general fund to Fund 4. And we actually had a street.
Fund 4 is what?
Fund 4 is that it's the construction, it's the sales tax reserve fund. And so we're moving some of that support there. We're also moving, we had a streets transferred out that we had from the general fund, we're actually moving that to REIT. So we're trying to, put capital where it belongs. If we're generating capital revenues, we're moving those pots to make it make more sense. And we're trying to keep general fund as much operations as we can. Because again, operations has to be supported by the general fund mostly, and we want to make sure it's sustainable over time.
So we take that 14.9 at the bottom left. So that's our general fund total expenditures or sorry, so I guess 19 would be the 14.5.
Yes.
If you go back to your slide, 2 slides ago, is that going to be the 14.5 we saw there? That's revenue.
Revenue.
Is that on, oh, do we need to add a couple things to get to that? Is that what happens?
We do, yes.
Okay, all right, never mind.
This is a snapshot out here. So 15 million for 2020 estimated budget. Again, this does not include Fund 4 as far as transfers out. This is just from the general fund only. And so, again, our preliminary budget assumptions, we factored in all base requests from the department. Again, for definition purposes, base requests. Our budgets needed to maintain standard operations from previous years. Factored in, and we actually found out about this today, 7% healthcare cost increase. For example, little things like that could change between now and the budget. I factored 5%, close, but it was 7%. So
7% is pretty good.
It is still good, yes,
Pretty good.
absolutely.
It's only 7% is pretty good.
Yeah. A lot of other places, you're in the high double digits at times. 5% increases for salary and benefits annually, so that includes any step increases, that includes any longevity. That's trying to cover that as much as we can. And then we took 3% inflationary increases standard annually for services and supplies. And so our assumptions, this again does not include department enhancements or various new elements of capital funding. Those the mayor is still vetting, and they will be presented at council workshops that are upcoming. We have 4 different council workshops. We're going to have 1 dedicated just for capital planning. The budget factors in a 20% annual general fund reserve target. So again, we're trying to, on that fund balance you see, the ending fund balance, we're trying to make sure that those first 4 funds, because those are pretty much your general fund reserve, compounded together, equate to 20% of funding. We're also going to take an additional 5% of contingency. So this has come up, I know, quite a few times since I've been here, where the budgets were just line item budgets. That's how they were done last year. There was no contingency built in. Like, for example, when Leadership East Side came up, departments didn't have any discretionary budgets whatsoever. So what we're taking is a 5% contingency across the general fund expenditures for unanticipated expenses, and to make sure that we're not going over budget for the things that do come up during the year or have to go to council for very small items that may come up. So we believe that the 5% contingency will assist with that. And so 5% contingency is approximately $723,000 of general fund spending in 2019.
So I just want to make sure everyone understands what you said, because you talked about 2 different things that to accountants are very clearly very different things, but to others often look like the same thing.
Yes.
Your budget factor of 20% reserve target, that's something to do with fund balance. It's nothing to do with revenues or expenditures. It's saying...
Well, it does, because we're taking the 20% based off what our estimated expenditures are. That's what our target is.
So what it's saying is he's going to the expenditures, taking the total for the year, he's multiplying it by 20% and saying, we ought to have that much fund balance just sitting around. Right? Fund balance sitting around. Think of that as like money in the bank account, like a savings account. It's just sitting there in case we need it. It's a reserve.
It's part of the ending fund.
Whereas it's
disaster strikes, yeah.
Whereas 5% contingency, what he's talking about there is he's saying, okay, when you go add up all the expenses for the year, what he's actually done is made them be a little bit higher than what their base budget thinks, just in case some things come up during the year.
Unforeseen things.
Unforeseen things, and he tried to give an example of a training course that exceeded the training budget. So, excuse me, so the total budget, you know, if he thinks we're going to spend $50 for the year, he's put in $55 into the expenses.
52.5.
Excuse me, 52.5.
50, yeah.
Never
Gotta
been,
take out that HP calculator yours.
I've never been good with numbers.
It's comforting.
We have a scientific calculator on Drew's desk if you want to borrow it.
Use a $100 base, it'd be a lot easier.
Yeah, I should have done that. So, so those are 2 different things he's doing. He's saying there's this reserve that's not intended to be a reserve or to used. That's sort of sitting that's our safety, that's our savings account, if you will, kind of concept. Whereas the 5% he's talking about is he's saying rather than this thing where in the past what the city's done is budgeted just the bare minimum, and then they have to come back and you've seen all the little $5,000 requests we get over and over, and we're like, geez, really? What, just this little it'd be. What they're actually going to do is say, you know what, we're budgeting aggressively, but let's get people to budget aggressively, but then put a little bit extra into the budget so that when they miss a little bit, we're just covered. We don't have to go bother the council. So they wouldn't come back to bother us unless they burn through the 5%. Then they're actually a fair amount off. They need to come talk to us about it. So that's what he's trying to tell us about those two different things. I just want to make sure we kind of took that in.
It just means they'll bother the city administrator and the mayor more. But,
that's fine.
Yeah. But to get to your point, it's moving us toward more budget discipline and this concern about appropriating the whole budget, where we've sort of always used that as, well, how are we going to pay for this thing that the council or the city didn't foresee? Well, let's just dip into some of the reserves, which was.
Or ending fund balance. A lot of the times that was just, our planned ending fund balance was affected.
And for what it's worth, I'll just give you my opinion, which is any well-run for-profit business, this is absolutely what they do. I mean, you can arm wrestle. Is it 4%? Is it 5%? Is it 7%? You arm wrestle over the amount, but the notion of doing that is absolutely accepted across any well-run business, and to my knowledge, across any well-run government, not-for-profit, any well-run budgeted organization will do this kind of a concept. And the key is you just want to make sure that doesn't get to something silly like 20 or 25%, in which case your budget really doesn't mean much. So what he's recommending is what he thinks is a reasonable amount, and unless we disagree, then he's just letting us know that's what he's doing.
Yes. So how much is, I see you've given us a dollar figure for the 5% reserve. How much is the 20%?
20% is,
14 million times 20%. It's on the other page.
2.8. I noticed you didn't take a stab at it this time.
I learned my lesson.
Not without your little TI,
That was
right?
an easy math problem.
You took the hard one.
Be able to add these Fund 2, 3, 4 together? Or?
Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, yes.
Oh, one? No, reserve funds.
Yeah, but
2, 3,
general fund balance also counts towards that, so 1, 2, 3, 4, so it's the total of the first four.
Oh, 20% of the total of the first four?
Correct.
Okay.
That's just over 5 million.
No, it should be 2.8.
But you can see it gets drawn down a bit, so. So again, and part of that too, that we have not added to this budget, that will draw it down a little bit, is we have about $500,000 available that is not in here yet, available for budget requests or enhancements by departments that are currently reviewed by the mayor. So that will impact that number as far as the increases, and again, we'll go through it in the workshops in detail. And so the other assumption we're doing, we're creating a facilities capital fund. We actually don't have one dedicated facilities capital fund. I see somebody chuckling over there. So we believe it's responsible to start that. We're going to start it in 19. We're going to program it with $1 million of annual support from the sales tax reserve fund. So Councilmember Shepherd, it goes into why that fund is going to have expenditures and drop a bit. It's because we're going to program $1 million directly into that fund each year. Increase support of street overlay maintenance from REIT fund. So we had a street overlay fund that we were not spending money from. That was over about $700,000. We're going to put that into the streets fund. We're going to have one street fund for overlays. We're going to treat overlays like capital. We're going to factor in a master plan and make sure that we have guaranteed revenue going into that each year. But you can see that in 2021, there will be some discussions, because if you look down the list and you look at the REIT fund, you can see that we're forecasting a slowdown, obviously, in real estate a little bit. And so when it hits that point, there's going to have to be a discussion, of course, in the future budget on how to sustain those support. But for the next 2 years, we have the support needed from REIT to increase our level support into streets.
So I assume in that last item, too, I mean, the intent here, council a few years back, committed funds on an ongoing basis, about $300,000 a year to to ongoing sustainable park infrastructure maintenance, which then gives Dan a great deal of predictability to actually then come up with a robust long-term plan for keeping on top of all that infrastructure. We've never given him that tool for streets or for facilities, and so these would give him similar tools to do the same in those regards.
Yes.
So where in this list is the bond, the fund that we just approved?
So that is in the funds in the back, so you can see the 417 revenue bond construction. And that is subject to change because we're going to update the rate study because we actually.
Okay, so it's labeled 2017 and I was.
Yeah, it should be 20, I'm sorry. We will rename the fund. We set it up assuming that it would be passed in 2017, so when we print it out,
So we're
that's
going,
what happens.
so we're going to see 22.7 million in 2019 of that.
That's actually the beginning fund balance, so again.
10 million was already spent.
Yes.
Yeah, we had 10 million towards
Okay,
past
got it.
projects.
Yes.
All right.
Again, this is an estimate that's going to change, and the project listing will change, but we'll keep council apprised of that, of course.
I think we have $43 left.
Skateboard.
And the other thing we're doing, and I'm sorry, there's a typo there, but we're investing in the capital funding for sidewalks. We're doing it in two different places. We actually have a sidewalk reserve fund that was not touched in previous years very much. So we're going to invest, specifically, which projects were those?
For sidewalks?
Yeah, the one where the tripping hazard was.
Kinsey?
Yes. Yes, that's actually, we put funding towards that already in the budget. And we also put funding remaining from a Complete Streets grant towards a pedestrian enhancement project in downtown. And so again, we're trying to make sure that, as you can see, it's kind of a twofold approach that we have right now. Is one, secure sustainability on the general fund. Two, keep reserves, but spend as much as we can on the capital, support it as much as we can, because again, if the economy went down or went to zero, for example, you can defer streets, but we want to make sure we're not in a position where we're too reliant on the general fund for capital needs or quote unquote discretionary needs. We want to make sure the core services of the city, the public health, public safety, that's protected with the revenues that we have coming in.
So would it be fair for me to put it another way, which is to say, when we were talking earlier about committed and restricted, there's this chunk of money which, in my opinion, past councils have been extremely responsible on and have set aside one-time revenues. What they didn't do, what they said is you can't use this for operating because it's not reliable, it's not recurring. You have to set it aside. What you're talking about now is saying we're actually now going to take the step of committing that each year actually into capital purposes, so that whether it's the second step of saying you can't use it for operating, now we're actually going to sort of by policy say, and here's what you are getting, here's what you can use it for, and it's going to be streets and sidewalks, and you're setting up these amounts in these categories to sort of complete that picture. Is that a fair way of saying it?
That's correct. And as we can, because again, things can change and we can get into economic downturns, but we want to make sure that while we're up here and we can keep the reserve, we can address capital needs before we get into deferred maintenance issues.
Yeah, so we sort of set up a policy, and then, we'll have to see how we go, but it's a policy that starts to commit recurring revenues, as long as they're there,
yes,
to these, and, it provides for more of a planning horizon for Parks and Public Works to really think about how they're going to fund those things and setting up a plan just like they have for parks in the past.
That's correct.
Mm-hmm. I have one other question for you, just on this REIT fund, not REIT fund, the revenue bond fund. So I see it goes down to $43 by the end of 2020. So that would imply, based on our 5-year capital, let's see, utilities CIP, that would imply that, because you wouldn't actually do that, that would imply that probably in 2020 is where we'd be looking to go out.
Yeah, that's
for
the bond
additional
issue specifically. So we are required to spend that issue
Right.
through 2020. So that's
Right, but since the total was 55, we funded 30. This sort of implies that 2020 is when we'll have to grapple with where do we stand, and is it time to go out for additional bond or what?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Just kind of, this, I just see that implication here and just want to share it with other council members that that's basically what they're telling us is that's about the time frame that we're going to need to think about.
What part of the budget? Get the rest done with $43?
No.
Not according to our utility CIP, but the Parks and Public
I have
Works
faith that
chairman
Mr.
probably.
Saxton will make it work.
There is not one $43 capital project on that list.
It depends on our alternate project delivery guys.
Exactly.
That's how we do it.
By definition, a capital project cannot be $43. But anyway, go on.
Again, just the next steps, Mayor and City Administrator are meeting with departments this week to finalize the budget request. So again, the target's $500,000 in that spending for upcoming budget workshops with council, and then update a rate study following the recent bond sales for utilities. The one part of the budget that we don't want to spend too much time, frankly, going through this is utilities. That's going to change because the project listing is going to change as we go through this process. The spending needs and the utility rate study, and actually our revenues right now, knock on wood, are coming in higher than anticipated. Hot summer actually helps for usage. It's good for business, but there's no guarantees in the future. So that's one that we stay on top of, and it'll have deep analysis in the future.
So if I could just make the suggestion that with that in mind, maybe as you talk us through this, as we get through to passing this budget in December, if, for example, utilities is really going to be more of an ongoing thing that has moving parts, if you kind of set the expectation with us as to how that will be communicated, how, you know, is it going to be quarterly? How will that be sort of interacted? Give us a sense of what that'll look like. I assume that's largely going to happen at Parks and Public Works Committee, but if you could kind of, as we go through this, sort of set in our minds how this is going to work, how we're going to monitor this, I think that'll be really helpful to
Yeah, we're
us.
certainly going to go back to quarterly budget updates with council, and with utilities, at least twice a year, but probably quarterly as well. So yes. But with committees quarterly, especially. And any questions? And if anybody has any questions on the budget or would like to sit down with me, I'm available anytime. So thank you.
Robert, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Robert. All right, with that, we had a couple other items. Where's that list, Jody? Thank you. Councilor Ross, did you want to give an update about the SCA?
I do. So Sound City Association has appointing authority for over 30 regional boards and committees, and there are seats on 21 of these boards that are available to be appointed for in 2019. And so I'll forward you out the list. The deadline for this, for applications, is October 31st, in case you're interested in any one of these. And I would suggest, you know, if you're interested in a position, you could seek support from the council, and we, you know, if we wrote a resolution for you, that might help enhance your chances of getting that appointment. So I'll send it out to you if you guys are interested. I'll send it out anyway.
All right, Councilmember Holloway?
So I just want to, I guess, put forward some lab facts to alternate facts that were stated last council meeting, which related cancer incidents to city water. We test our water, we are required to test quarterly, we test monthly. For municipal water in cancer-related clusters, it's usually related to things like tungsten, arsenic, and benzene. Arsenic is a natural occurring mineral, and we have natural water, so we test for arsenic. The healthy limit by federal law is 10 parts per billion. We're at 3 parts per billion. And we are unaware of any cancer cluster for Snoqualmie in specific. I think there are 2 for Washington State. One is breast cancer, just because we test very heavily in this state, and it shows up as an increase. The other one, I can't remember the exact cancer, but it's basically vitamin D deficiency because we live in the dark for 6 months out of the year. So the linkage of cancer incidents to city water is an incorrect alternate fact of reality. I'm done.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Lissay, you had a question for the council on a possible resolution regarding, I think specifically requesting of WASDOT, give a little more heft to my request, or Senator Mullet's request on access during construction. Did you want to?
Right, yeah, I can just touch on it quickly. And it went to, reminded me about it when I saw that your message discussing the Highway 18 interchange, Highway 18 I-90 interchange. And I think I had a sidebar discussion with State Representative, why am I drawing a blank? Paul Graves. And he recommended also that if we had, if, you know, something from the city would have some bearing, would have some may or may not have bearing, but may or not have influence, but it would show a unified front as the council and the mayor, and from the city then, that simply doing nothing to help the residents of Snoqualmie isn't acceptable to us, that a resolution was probably a good way to go. So I wanted to float that out in front of everyone and say, I'm more than willing to have staff write that up and write up the base resolution, and maybe how we do it, if we do it mayor and council as a joint resolution that says, you know, basically what you'd indicated was a right-hand turn onto the freeway during construction to help alleviate that construction backup. If it has influence, great. If it doesn't, we've at least gone on the record of saying that we're not happy with the situation.
And I know Councilmember Sunwell's going to want to add the hardening of the shoulder for the.
I'll let him do the drawing.
Westbound 90 coming off.
I did my drawing. I'm hired, right?
Going up the
Well,
park.
you're still under review.
Councilmember Sunwell.
So the only thing I would add to that is I had the unfortunate yet exhilarating opportunity. I think I sent this around to city council members and I posted on Facebook of going through a series of divergent diamond interchanges in the Salt Lake City area when I was down there a few weeks ago. They're pretty cool, by the way. Driving on the wrong side of the road, I almost felt like I was supposed to be speaking with an accent. But don't you? Don't I? But it is mind-blowing to me that we need to have a bunch of community engagement about widening a mile-long stretch of Highway 18 and fixing that mess. That's like having a committee decide, you know, whether or not we think it should be cloudy in the summer or not. I don't understand how WashDOT works. It sounds to me like it's a very typical government organization. I know I'm in one right now. But you know, the thought that came to me was they just finished the bridge work on I-90 just west of the summit. And of course, anybody who did that, we did it like 3 out of 4 weekends in a row. We had to cross the interchange. So we're talking about cars going 70, 80 miles an hour, semi-loaded heavy trucks that they managed to put a temporary pavement patch crossing from one side of the freeway to the other, and they managed to make that work. And now they're probably going to blow it up because they won't ever need it again. I don't understand why they can't do something like that on the Parkway for a right turn only in the morning. It doesn't make any, and then, of course, solving that problem, going westbound from North Bend and the backup that creates there so we can go right to go up the Parkway. But more importantly is that morning solution. And I can't believe that can't be done for a relatively affordable cost and that can't be integrated into the final solution. And, you know, I shouldn't have to be in a position to create design review or design options for these people. That's what they do for a living. But I can't understand how that's not possible.
So I'll take that as a yes to Councilmember Say's request.
That's 2 votes.
Okay. So a little more background information. Late Wednesday night, I got a call or spoke at length to Senator Mullet, and he's a bit frustrated about it too. He has been pushing this issue because he knows that's kind of our new priority. I mean, in addition to getting the interchange done, that's our new priority in the short term that would alleviate the issues, you know, quickly into the beginning of the construction rather than waiting to completion in 2023. To his frustration, WashDOT's initial analysis is coming back. Their consternation is they're saying they don't want dollars spent on some temporary improvements that would be taken away from further improvements down the SR 18. And what they mean is their initial cost estimates just to do, for example, hardening of the shoulder, moving on culverts or whatever is their maybe over-the-top temporary solution on an extra lane coming off of 90, going westbound 90 to come off to the bottom and then turn right on the Parkway. That has about a $3 million price tag. And the designated lane going onto the I-90 westbound from the Parkway in the morning would be about a $2 million plus price tag, which I think that both of us struck us as a little over the top outrageous. I mean, I don't think we would support those kind of numbers either, but it just seems inconceivable.
Something doesn't tell me it costs $2 million to cross I-90 traffic from one side of the freeway to the other.
It just seems there's got to be a more cost-effective way to do it. It doesn't have to be the prettiest, nicest solution initially. So we'll keep pressing it, but I welcome a resolution. I suspect it would be unanimous from the city council that I can give to Senator Mullet so he can use that in his conversations with Wannstedt. The more voices, the better in that regard. Councilmember Mayhew.
Yeah, I agree with all of this. I'd add to it, perhaps we could talk to, I believe the city has at least some use of a lobbyist in Olympia, and I think if we could talk to that lobbyist and whatever other resources, Senator Mullet, Congressman Graves, Representative Graves, rather, whomever we can talk to get, let's figure out how we can put as much pressure on the system as we can, because my guess is there are ways above and beyond just the resolution. I'm positive that will be helpful, but what else can we do? And I believe that there's council members who are willing to put time into this, and let's just see if we can really try to achieve better outcome on this, faster, cheaper, I guess, sounds to be like some of the problem, but I think there's many of us would like to put in time and really try to move this forward as fast as we can.
Here's a crazy thought. You know that money we're supposed to be giving back to the Muckleshoots because we don't need it because the project's been fully funded?
Okay.
That we just talked about this 3 hours ago. Wasn't there money we gave back for the interchange because we didn't need it because it was fully funded by the state?
That was 202.
No, it was, but I'll ask Bob Sturbank.
That wasn't I-90 18?
We didn't give any money back. That there was a requirement in one of the earlier iterations of the development agreement that was removed from the currently effective amended and restated version because that project had already been completed. I think the original language required payment at the time of building permit issuance, I want to say, and so when we got to the amended and restated agreement, that was removed because by the time they got to building permit,
time to amend and restate again.
It was fully satisfied.
So, sorry.
On the
It's late, but yeah, in any way,
worth a try.
There wasn't money that was given back. The money was never.
I didn't mean given back, but I mean that they didn't have to come forth.
But I would just say, I suspect Councilmember Sundwall is absolutely right in his thinking, which is I suspect that those rather inflated estimates are some kind of discouragement of us trying to come with solutions, and I would encourage us not to be discouraged and not to accept those numbers, and let's see what we can do here.
Yeah, no, that's why I'm welcoming the resolution.
So what's the mechanics of that? How would that come about?
Well, I mean, we could just, I mean, if you're giving us direction tonight, we could prepare a letter that could be signed by the council, and I think you guys would trust that we, rather than waiting 2 more weeks, because we do have a meeting set up with Senator Mullet next week.
Could you have it for Monday?
And we'll be meeting with Judy Cliburn, I think, with the next couple of weeks. What's that?
Can you have it for Monday committee meeting?
For us to sign? I'm saying if you could have it ready for Monday committee meetings, we could all sign.
Well, we need to chase you guys down anyway, so you'd have a chance to review it and then sign it.
When do you meet with Mullet?
Yeah, it was very
shocking
important.
your meeting at Zeke's
It's very
Pizza.
important that you put Zeke's Pizza on there. That's a plug for Senator Mullet's business, of course.
Called Mullet's
Not
Pizza.
on the record, that's good.
Let them know that I asked my office to order pizza from Zeke's the party we had last week.
So, but it's not a resolution then, it's a letter of some sort that we would all sign.
A letter of
Yeah,
condemnation.
just one, Councilmember Lassay, could you just make a motion to have the staff prepare a letter in support of a?
I move that staff prepare a letter of
Second.
resolution for addressing the I-90 Highway 18 interchange.
Yeah, access during construction.
Access during construction.
All right. We have a motion, a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So we'll, Dan, I take it you'll take that, or we'll, okay. All right. what are the, I think we pretty much covered all the, one more item on that. And I probably ought to circle more information. Some of the background information, of course, is, or probably what's tied up the momentum on this is the way station move and connected with North Bend. So actually, for the sake of time, I think it'd be probably better if I gave you some of that background information separately. So remind me to do that, Council. I believe we've hit on most all the committee of the whole items. Is there anything that, oh shoot, I just got blue screen.
It must be time to go.
Yeah, there we go.
Mr. Mayor, I think, I don't know if anything needs to be done, but I had asked you to reorder, so I don't know if you needed to do anything with AB 18-111.
Oh, that's right. We wanted to jump back in and start doing that?
I don't know what that was on, I can't remember.
No, I think,
No,
yeah,
it's
it's
a
just a
placeholder.
placeholder.
We introduced it. It holds on the agenda until such time as we choose to make action.
We allocated 2 hours early in the evening, so you wouldn't have to spend more time until midnight tonight, so.
Well, we can if you want to.
Well, we have 3 executive sessions, so.
We're ready.
I'm just trying to help him out.
Let's do this.
You told me to remind him.
All right,
Four
so
now.
if there are other announcements, I don't have them in my notes anymore, so any announcements?
There's just one, the Snoqualmie Valley Government Association's meeting this Wednesday, and in Duval, several councilors are already signed up. If anybody else wants to go, please notify Jody immediately. You can accommodate that still. And there's going to be if anybody's interested, there could be a carpool.
I have stepped up as president of that organization this year, so. All right, so, and the staff meetings are not written the second meeting of the month, correct? Any staff meetings or reports at this time? Any questions? Bob's saying no, none of the staff have any. Okay.
We're good.
All right, so with that, we're going to move on to executive session. Pursuant to RCW 342.30.11, Section 1C, regarding a real estate transaction, Bob Sturbank, Nicole Saunders, Mark Hoffman, and Bob Larson are asked to remain. The executive session will last approximately 15 minutes, and there may be action following. There will also be 2 additional executive sessions regarding litigation pursuant to RCW 42.30.110, Section 1II. Bob Larson, Bob Sturbank, and Dan Marcinko are asked to join the session. It'll last approximately 30 minutes, and there may be action following.
So,
Mayor, on those other 2, I think we'll only have 1 instead of 2 of the following litigation items.
Okay, as Sturbank. Yes, sir.
Just to the P's and Q's, should we go ahead and motion to extend the meeting beyond 10 o'clock?
That's probably not a bad idea, since it'll inevitably happen.
Regretfully, motion to extend the meeting beyond 10 o'clock.
Can we vote against this?
Yes, you may.
Second.
Doesn't mean you won't be here by 10
You have a motion and a second to extend the meeting past 10 o'clock. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. So with that, we're going to go into executive session. Everybody else gets to go home and enjoy the rest of their long evening.